Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. Hello, hello. Happy Monday to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you're coming in from, I hope that you're having a wonderful day. And my Wi-Fi is, or internet, I should say. I'm not on Wi-Fi. I'm on Ethernet. For whatever reason, it is a little bit spotty. Let's see if that'll fix itself in just about a minute. Well, I think we're just going to be a little bit spotty looking. But yeah. So happy Monday to everybody. We've got another very interesting episode of Classic Trials today. This is episode 29 now. We will have done 29 of these after today, which is just kind of crazy. So go figure. Let's say hi to some folks in the chat here. David Faison Cook, good morning, friends. Good morning, Debbie. Sandra Ramirez, good morning, fellow biters. Don't forget to hit that like on the way in. Thank you so much for reminding everybody, Sandra. Sandra and I saw that Shireen was also in the chat. A couple of our mods, we'll probably see Kit Kat later on. She usually shows up at some point and helps out with the wonderful modding. Bronwyn W, good morning from sunny Utah. Krista Hobeck, right? I think I got that last time or maybe the time before. Good morning from Michigan. Good morning from the oven mitt of the country. Jessica, good morning. All happy Monday. Happy Monday to you. Emily Aarons, good morning from Wisconsin. Good morning. Draco Amy, hello, gorgeous people. Love to see it. Love to see it. And we've got some more here that showed up while I was looking at that. Let's see. Mountain Princess 207. Hello from rainy Maine. All right. We've got Living Life with and Singing Songs from Mallory. Hello, Mallory. I hope you're doing well. This is, Legal Minded Friends, Karen Cole. This is the first notification I got from you in over a year. Oh no. Those notifications are sometimes just really funky like that. I don't know why. But hello from England. Hello. Andrew McCree, good morning from Winnipeg, Canada. I hope I pronounced your last name right. But good morning. Bless Mama, good morning from SoCal. We've got Mountain Princess. Oh, also saying hello to Christian and Ardo. That wasn't meant for me. Uncivil Law. It's Mrs. Bites. It is indeed. Good to see you, Kurt. We've got Summer Butterfly. Good morning from Indiana. Good morning. Ardo Rissanen. Good evening from Finland as usual. Evening to you. Sarah V. Good morning, everyone. So ready for some Alita time. Love it. Uncivil Law, but I call her legal because we're friends. LOL. Of course. And we've got Has01. Good. Hello, all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Edmonton, Alberta. I love it. Love to see it. Okay. So, like I said, we've got some exciting stuff. There's probably going to be some tea. Because our first witness, which I believe so she's going to testify twice. The first is going to be for outside the presence of a jury. And I'm saying this because I've sort of like blitzed pretty quickly just to get the timestamps. And so she's the second time both juries are there. So she's not doubling up on her testimony. It's probably my best guess is for the court to determine whether or not she can testify, and if she can, to what kinds of things she can testify to. So first, we're going to hear from sorry, if maybe I should have my notes in front of me. Pamela LiCausi. So she's going to testify about Dr. Oziel. So how much creepy tea are we going to get? Then we're going to get some testimony from some neighbors today. Beverly Hills neighbors. So neighbors that heard the shooting or heard, certain things, or maybe saw some things. I'm not sure, but we've got Emmanuel Zlotolow, and then they skip over her name. And they don't list her on the web page where this video shows up, where this feed shows up. But this hearing, what I gathered from the little bit that I managed to hear, was her name is Mrs. Lord. I don't know her first name. If there's anybody in the chat, I know that there's some Menendez experts in the chat that often show up. So if anybody knows her first name, please feel free to, let me know in the chat, and I'll update it. She's also a neighbor. She says that she heard what she thought was like firecrackers. Anyway, so then after that, most of today is going to be hearing from Teresita Baralt. Sorry, I totally butchered it. Teresita Baralt. That is Jose's one of his other sisters. I don't know how many siblings he has, but we heard from Cano. Marta was the daughter, right? Or is Marta her mother, Jose's sister? I'm already mixing things up. Mrs. Cano, I could say. We heard from her, and she's Jose's sister, but now we will be hearing from another one of Jose's sisters, Teresita Baralt. So that will be very, very interesting as well. So today's probably gonna be, some interesting stuff today. Good girl, Indy Bear. You taking a bigger spot on the floor? That's fine. You can do that. I love you. Okay. With that, and I probably don't mention it enough, but I did pin it. It's the current pinned chat, which will go away as soon as we start today. There's a link to Instagram where I'm doing the weekly recaps. I managed to just get last week's recap up like 15 minutes ago, and I apologize. I thought it had uploaded and then it didn't. And so, then I had to scramble at the very end. So, but it is there. So I started doing that maybe like a couple months ago, maybe something like that. April, May, I'm not sure. I can't remember now. I've lost track. But I'm doing that every week now before the next episode. So if you miss one, or if you kind of forget what we talked about, because these are 3-4 hour sessions. The longest one we've done is 5. It's easy to forget, especially when there's like 1 week in between each of these. So, I'm just doing like really brief recaps each week. So, hit that link. You can go to Instagram and check that stuff out as well. So, okay, without further ado, I thought I felt a cat somewhere. So, without further ado, we will get moving. All right, let's do this. We're starting with our first witness, who is Pamela LiCausi.
Now, pending before this question, your truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, you tell us your full name and spell your last name.
Pamela Lisa Lacazi. My last name is spelled L-I, capital C-A-U-S-I.
Yeah, she's got a great braid.
Did you work for an individual named Richard Klein back in 1987?
Yes.
And did Richard Klein had a group called Intercontinental Group? Was that the name of the business?
Yes, it was.
What was your role in that business?
I was the executive assistant, secretarial, among other things.
And what were your duties and responsibilities?
I interacted with the clients, and I also helped get new clients. Basically, I did everything from secretarial, computers, took care of flight arrangements, arranged meetings, and was
Basically
involved with all meetings, all planning.
And how many employees were involved in Mr. Klein's group?
There was about 9 of us.
And did you, on a certain date, come to know a person named L. Jerome Oziel?
Yes.
Could you tell us how you came to know him?
Well, when I first started working there, like the first day, Richard mentioned that this was his friend, but also a psychiatrist too, and that he would be calling in and to always take his phone calls, and that I would be seeing this particular person often.
And did you, in fact, come to see him often?
Yes, I did.
Did you see him in person
Yes.
and also talk to him numerous times on the telephone?
Yes.
Did you see him interacting with your boss, Mr. Klein?
Yes.
And could you tell us how frequently you saw that take place?
So frequently I couldn't even count. I mean, it was like a everyday occurrence or every other day.
And would you personally attend meetings where Dr. Oziel was present with your boss?
Yes.
And how frequently would that take place?
Meetings, maybe once a week, formal meetings.
And would these meetings involve Dr. Oziel interacting with other people beside Richard Klein?
Yes.
Who would he be interacting with that you were able to observe?
There was a man named Jeff Seaman, Gina Zacchia, another fellow named Jeff, I can't recall his last name, Todd Marshall. Those are the only ones I can recall right now.
And for what period of time did you have this contact with Dr. Oziel?
For almost a year.
So in 1987 is when it began, and then you worked there for approximately a year.
Yes.
And during that whole period of time, was your contact with Dr. Oziel on a frequent basis?
Yes.
And did he actually have a space there in your office?
Yes. When they started the new business, not at first, when they started the new Automax business.
Automax was a business that Richard Klein and Dr. Oziel had formed together.
Well, Richard came up with the concept, and then Mr. Oziel came in after that.
And Mr. Oziel actually moved into the office?
He didn't. He still kept his other private office in Beverly Hills because he is a psychiatrist. But the people that were involved with Automax were saying you have to cut ties with all of that if you're going to totally come on board here. So for a while he had two things going, and there was a little squabbling in regards to that. And finally, they made some kind of contract where he'd get more money than he thought he was going to get. And then he went ahead and said, okay, he left his patients.
Then he actually came into your office.
Yes.
And during the time after and even before that he came into your office, did you see him in situations where he would make statements to certain people and then directly contradictory statements to other people?
Yes.
And did that occur frequently?
All the time.
And did there come a time when your boss, Richard Klein, was hospitalized?
Yes.
Was that in 1988?
Yes.
And after he was hospitalized, after he got out of the hospital, was he forced out of his office by Jerry Oziel?
During the period that Richard was in the hospital, gave Jerry Oziel more opportunity to backstab him, to play him down, to say bad things about Richard. He got more manipulating control over the whole situation.
Did you see her facial expression when she's like, I gave him more opportunity, as in like what she was communicating there without even saying any word. And this is why televised trials are just so great to watch, because you can see someone's expression. But the way that she said that with her eyebrows raised and kind of head tilted to the side was like, we dealt with this all the time. He tried backstabbing him all the time. And this just gave him even more opportunity for it. Doing that to a man in the hospital. Wow, wow, wow.
Situation totally bad-mouthed Richard, and he's supposedly his best friend and his psychiatrist.
And you were in the office observing this take place while your boss was in the hospital,
right?
Correct? Now, after your boss got out of the hospital, did Mr. Oziel remain with Richard Klein in the same office, or was there a parting of the ways?
There was a parting of the ways. Everything was kind of hectic. The excuse, Jerry had turned almost everyone against Richard, all of his employees that he had for a long time. And the excuse that they gave was that the Automax was going to become so big that this particular building we were in wasn't going to be able to fit everyone. So they went and found another location.
And did Dr. Oziel take a certain number of Richard Klein's employees with him?
Yes, he did.
And did you continue to communicate with those employees who you had worked with previously about Dr. Oziel's exploits?
Yes.
And did you continue to communicate with Richard Klein about Dr. Oziel and his involvement with your boss right up until last year when your boss died.
Yes.
And based on that length of time, did you form an opinion about Dr. Oziel's character for honesty or lack thereof?
Yes, I have.
And what is your opinion?
My opinion, after working with him for 1 year and seeing how he acts, my opinion about Dr. Oziel is that he is greedy, malicious,
Wow.
deceitful.
Oh,
He preys, manipulates, and brainwashes vulnerable people. He has no ethics, no morals. He's a professional liar.
wow.
He makes David Koresh look like a saint. He's scary. He really scares me.
And would it be fair to say, based on what you just said, that your opinion is that he is a dishonest person?
Very dishonest.
And do you also, based on your contact with him and talking to other people who know him within his circle of friends, are you able to testify what his reputation is for honesty or the lack of honesty in his business circle of friends?
Yes, I'm able to do that.
What is his reputation?
His reputation is one for being a snake,
Oh,
backstabber, liar. Can't trust him.
Thank you. That's all I think. That would be the offer of proof, really.
wow. Do you think maybe she's got some strong opinions on him? Wow. I mean, okay, granted, she hasn't, there hasn't been any cross-examination up to this point. So how well does that hold up? I don't know, but those are some strong ass words right there.
Cross-examination?
Yes. Emmanuel Zlotolow? LiCausi?
Yes.
With whom have you spoken about Dr. Oziel's reputation?
Pardon me?
With whom have you spoken about Dr. Oziel's reputation for these character traits that you've just told us about?
Richard Klein,
Who else?
Gina Zacchia, this other person named Jeff that I can't recall his last name. There was Karen.
Were these all people that were involved in Mr. Klein's original business?
Yes.
And at some point, Mr. Klein's original business, did it fall apart or did it go broke or what happened to
Well,
it?
the tax laws changed, and you couldn't get the same kind of tax benefit for equipment leasing, so they went on to other ventures.
But what happened to the business that you were originally hired to work for?
Well, it was still ongoing because we still had clients involved, and you couldn't just stop it. We had to wrap things up, and still to this day, some people do get involved, but the tax benefit is not as great as it used to be.
Did the business begin to lose money after the tax laws changed?
Yeah, it wasn't as profitable.
Okay, did it begin to lose money though? There's a difference between making a profit.
I wasn't involved with the accounting department, so I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly yes or no.
Now, the people that you then have spoken to about Dr. Oziel's reputation for honesty are all people who were originally involved with you and Mr. Klein in this business of his.
Yes.
And you haven't spoken to anyone outside of this particular business, is that correct?
I've seen the TV and yeah, I've discussed it. When I first saw this on TV, I was shocked when I found out Jerry Oziel was the physician for these boys, because I thought, oh, those poor guys, because I know how he is.
Whoa.
You haven't spoken to anyone else about his reputation?
Yes, I have.
Well, people who know him?
No.
All right, so the only people that you've spoken to about his reputation who knew him were these people that you've listed: Richard Klein, Gina Zacchia, Jeff, and Karen.
Also, Elmer and Helen Klein, Richard's parents.
Now, Mr. Klein had a drinking problem, is that correct?
Yes, he did.
And when he was hospitalized, that was for hepatitis, correct?
Yes.
Which is a liver ailment.
Yes.
And now the business that you originally were hired to work for, you said there were 9 employees. Were those employees that
Approximately.
you supervised?
No, actually, everybody had their own job.
All right. And then after the tax law changed and the business became less profitable, it was at that time that Mr. Klein and Dr. Oziel went into the automats business. Is that correct?
Not at the exact time. The tax laws had changed in the previous year, and they were still working with people. You couldn't just cut people off like that. So business was still going on, and then they created Automax at the same time.
Okay. Was Automax ever a profitable business?
Yes.
And did Mr. Klein share in those profits?
I never saw him, get handed a check or anything, but I would assume so, yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated that when Mr. Klein went to the hospital, that it was at that time that Dr. Oziel forced him out. Could you explain exactly how that occurred?
While Richard was in the hospital, I was going back and forth to the hospital, but Jerry would say bad things about Richard, and he would start getting everybody on Jerry's side, talking about can I say profanities? Saying he was an
There's no need
asshole.
to do that,
Okay.
no.
All right. He would say awful things about him and turning all the other employees against Richard, and Richard's totally defenseless in the hospital. And by the time Richard got out of the hospital, boom, Jerry had already convinced.
Interesting how courtroom culture has also changed to today, where well, actually, we have heard some profanities in this courtroom, because remember, I think it was a couple weeks ago where there was somebody that wanted to testify to some. Oh, it was one of the tennis coaches who wanted to testify to something, some kind of a statement that was made. And he wanted to make sure it was okay to say in the courtroom. And so all of us were like, oh, we need to brace yourselves, guys. This is going to be really, really, really rough. We've heard some rough stuff in this case so far. This is going to be really rough. And then it ended up being like the F word or something, which is, yes, profane, but that was so anticlimactic for all of us, partly because courtroom standards, I think, have just kind of changed, because if somebody said something and you are testifying to the truth, the expectation is you testify to what you heard. I mean, even if you want to censor slightly, to indicate what the word is, but here the judge is just no, there's no need for profanities. I mean, there kind of is. If you're testifying to what somebody actually said, there is a little bit of a need for profanity, if that is what was accurately said.
Convinced everybody to move into this other place. So
At that time, was Mr. Klein then forced out of Automax?
pushed out, yeah,
All right. Now, was he a good businessman, Mr. Klein?
absolutely.
How often would he show up at work inebriated?
I don't know.
Was he
Usually at the end of the day is when it seemed like he would have a cocktail, have wine or something.
Was he inebriated almost every day at work?
Frequently. I wouldn't say every day.
And when you left, why?
You can tell that she really cares for her former boss too, because these questions about his alcoholism are maybe fair game. Maybe if they are relevant to be able to accurately tell the story, and to rebut some of these things about the reputation of Dr. Oziel, that, and she's here as a character witness, as a rebuttal witness to Dr. Oziel. So if that's kind of necessary to sort of rebut her rebuttal, but you can tell that it's one of those things that's she doesn't want to have to testify about these things that are there's a lot of pain around these kinds of matters. But agreeing that is something that was the case. He was an alcoholic. That's what he was hospitalized for, hepatitis, which, if I remember correctly, in the 90s, I remember that being a bit of a conversation when there would be hepatitis outbreaks in restaurants sometimes, and places like that. It's not a conversation that happens anymore, which I completely forgot about until they talked about hepatitis. But yeah, interesting. Okay. Anyway, I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent. Let's continue on.
Why is it you left?
It was just, everything was too much. I mean, I was like Richard's confidant. I was almost his mother, his secretary, his psychiatrist. I mean, I just took care of everything. And when he was in the hospital, his parents came out for 3 weeks. I went out to dinner with them every single night. Just got to the point where there was too much. It was too much for me to handle. trying to protect this man against Jerry, actually. I was turning into like the codependent type thing. I thought, uh-uh.
All right. So you left because Mr. Klein was basically too needy. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yeah, well,
And-
just the pressure was too much.
And so you at that time were protecting him. Is that correct?
Yes, that's just the way I am with all my friends and family and people I care about.
He was your employer.
Yes.
And how old a person was he during this period of time?
How old was he?
Yeah.
About 45.
Okay. Thank you.
Any redirect.
During the time that you knew Dr. Oziel, he never hit on you sexually.
No.
You're not.
Well, he kind of flirtatious, though.
But
tried to be.
You're not in the category of a jilted lover who had
No.
a grudge against Dr. Oziel.
No,
Never slept with him or anything.
absolutely not.
Thank you.
Absolutely
All right,
not.
anything else?
Never would have.
Okay, you may step down.
Okay, so now we're going to skip through the hearing part where they are sort of going back and forth about her testimony, and we're just going to skip right to her actual testimony in front of the jury. Let's see here. Okay.
All right, then let's get both juries in and we'll proceed. In the trial, we have now both juries present as well as all the other participants in the trial. Good morning to you all. And we're ready to resume with the trial. The defense may call its next witness.
My name is Pamela Lacazi. My last name is spelt Li capital C AUSI.
Good morning. Can you tell the juries where you reside?
I live on 1000.
So they mute this out so that we don't.
And were you living in Los Angeles
fine.
back in 1987 and 1988?
Yes, I was.
We don't
Where
need to
were
know
you
it.
working at that time?
A place called Intercontinental Group.
And what is Intercontinental Group?
It's an equipment leasing firm.
And what did you do in the company?
I was the executive assistant secretarial.
And who was your boss?
Richard Klein.
And could you tell the juries what you did for Mr. Klein?
Basically, I interacted with all of the investors. I did secretarial work, computers, among other things. I took care of making plans, meetings, attended meetings.
And you would actually physically be present at his meetings?
Yes, I would.
How many people were employed by Intercontinental Group?
Approximately 9.
And did you have contact with those 9 people as well as Mr. Klein?
Yes.
Did you have occasion in approximately early 1987 to meet a person named L. Jerome Oziel?
Yes.
And do you know if Mr. Oziel knew Richard Klein?
Yes.
Do you know how they knew each other?
Yes.
How did they know each other?
They knew each other. Jerry Oziel used to be or was his psychiatrist, then became his friend, then became his best friend, then became a business partner.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Well, do you know, without telling you what someone else told you, based on your own personal observation of seeing Mr. Klein and Mr. Oziel interact, what their relationship was?
Yes.
What was it?
Before, at one time, he was strictly his psychiatrist and friend, and then all of a sudden he became a business partner too.
And you know that because you were conducting Mr. Klein's business?
Exactly.
And were you also arranging through telephone or otherwise meetings between Mr. Oziel
Yes.
and Richard Klein?
Yes.
And can you give us your best estimation of when it was that you first came into contact with Mr. Oziel?
First day I ever worked there.
Which was when?
It was April 3rd, 1987, or April 4th, 1987.
And what was the business, if there was one, that Mr. Klein and Mr. Oziel were involved in?
They wanted to start a sort of credit card business called Automax.
A credit card business? Just very briefly, do you know the nature of the business without getting into details?
They would make a credit card that you could use to purchase vehicles, to rent vehicles, parts for vehicles, and then they wanted to expand even greater where you could almost like get your hair done or something with your credit card. They wanted to conquer the world with this particular credit card.
And if you know, whose business idea was that?
Richard Klein's.
And did Mr. Oziel come into the picture after Mr. Klein conceived of that business idea?
Yes, he did.
And did Mr. Oziel, in fact, move into the office that Richard Klein had at that time?
Yes, but he continued to still have his other office in Beverly Hills.
But he had a space in your office as well?
Yes.
And how frequently would you interact with Mr. Oziel during the period of time that you were working there?
I would talk to him every day almost on the telephone and at first, and he would come in like once a week. Then when the Automax business got started, every single day.
And would that interaction include phone contact as well as seeing him in person?
Yes.
And when you saw him in person, could you describe for the jury the situations just in general where you would interact with him in person?
Basically, he'd be in the office and we'd be having meetings and stuff. Sometimes all of us were not there. There'd be times when Richard would be handling a phone call in his office and Jerry would start saying bad things about Richard. And I would just say, wait a minute.
You
Well, wait a minute.
answer the question.
Okay.
You've gone actually beyond the question. So the last part of the answer about what was said by Mr. Oziel is strict.
My question was, what kinds of situations would you see them interact? You mentioned business meetings.
Business meetings,
And-
lunches.
And you would be personally present at these business meetings and luncheons?
Yes.
Were there situations where you would be with Mr. Oziel and Mr. Klein and other people, and you would hear Mr. Oziel make certain statements without getting into what the statements were?
Yes.
And then did you, outside the presence of Mr. Klein, hear him make directly contrary statements?
Yes.
And did you also hear him make similar contradictory statements about other employees that you were working with and Mr. Oziel was interacting with?
Okay, counsel, we're going beyond the offer here.
Over what period of time did you interact with Mr. Oziel where you were seeing him make statements both in and outside the presence of your boss, Mr. Klein?
10 to 11 months, constantly.
And did you also have occasion to see Mr. Oziel interact with other office staff besides Mr. Klein?
Yes.
And did there come a time when your boss was hospitalized?
Yes.
And do you know just roughly the time period when that happened?
I have it in my notes. I write everything on my calendar. Basically, it was probably 8 months into when I was working there.
And while your boss was hospitalized, did you have occasion to see Jerry Oziel operate in the business that you were involved in?
Yes.
And did you see him operate with other employees in the absence of your boss?
Yes.
And after your boss got out of the hospital, did Mr. Klein and Mr. Oziel separate business-wise?
They started separation.
And did Mr. Oziel take a certain number of employees who formerly worked for Mr. Klein and go somewhere else?
Yes.
And did you continue to interact with those former employees that Mr. Oziel took with him?
Yes.
Overall, the answer will stand.
And did you continue to interact with Mr. Klein specifically about Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And did you continue to interact with Mr. Klein right up to his death in 1992 concerning Mr. Oziel?
Not exactly up into his death. About
All
a
right,
year
you've
before.
answered the question.
Shortly before his death?
Yes.
All right. And based on your contact with Mr. Oziel during the period of time that you were involved with him and your observation of him in various situations, do you have an opinion as to his honesty or the lack thereof?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you tell the jury
Tell
what
us.
your opinion is about his honesty or his lack?
Give us your thoughts.
He is extremely dishonest.
Thank you very much.
All right, cross-examination.
Ms. LiCausi, you were very loyal to Mr. Klein, is that correct?
Yes.
And
And By the way, yeah, I do feel like this judge is being improperly impatient with her or just a couple minutes ago when he was like, "You've answered the question, now move on." She hadn't really. She kind of had, but not really. So, which I'm getting a little tired of it because it definitely is feeling like it's coming from one side,
And
or it's going to one side, I should say.
Mr. Klein and Dr. Oziel had a business falling out. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yes.
And did Mr. Klein have a drinking problem?
Yes.
And was he almost always inebriated during the time that you worked for him?
Frequently.
Did you give an interview to the defense investigator in this case?
Yes.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at that to see the frequency with which Mr. Klein was inebriated?
Overruled.
May I approach,
Well,
please?
first of all, the question was, would it refresh your memory?
Okay.
Yes.
Now, did you tell the defense investigators that Richard Klein was almost always inebriated?
I meant frequently.
Okay, not almost always.
Yes.
Were you present in Dr. Oziel's office on the night of October the 31st of 1989?
And the basis of the objection, beyond the scope of direct examination. Sustained.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Yes. Said you had a certain amount of loyalty to Mr. Klein,
Yes.
and you said he was inebriated. Was he a good businessman?
Yes, he was.
And did you think he was vulnerable?
Absolutely.
Did you think Dr. Oziel took advantage of him?
Without a doubt.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did you, in addition to seeing Dr. Oziel interact with your boss who was inebriated, also see him interact with several other people within your business?
Yes.
Is your opinion about his extreme dishonesty based solely on what you saw between Dr. Oziel and your boss?
No.
Objection beyond the scope of discretion.
Overruled. That answer will stand.
And could you explain why it's not based just on that opinion,
Objection irrelevant.
just on that
Objection sustained.
interaction?
Objection sustained. Under section 352 of the evidence code as well.
Could you explain to the jury why you had a certain loyalty to Mr. Klein?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
That's all I have to say.
All right. Anything else?
No.
All right. You may sit down. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You have your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. May I just go out in the hall?
Yes.
Emmanuel David Zlotolow, Emanuel David, Z like a zebra, Lotolow.
Mr. Zlotolow, in August of 1989, where were you living?
So,
Was that in the city?
I really hope she goes closer to the mic soon.
yes.
Mr. Burke is putting up a chart, which I would like marked Exhibit 200 for identification. It's
All right.
been shown to the district attorney.
That's a chart or a map of streets.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mr. Zlotolow, would you take a look at the chart that's been marked Exhibit 200 and see if you recognize
Yeah, I'm
what's
gonna
on there?
twist a little. I can't see.
Okay, you can. Here.
All right, I got it.
All right, there's a pointer over there if you're going to need him to point to anything.
Thank you, Glenn. Can you see it all right from where you are?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, here's a pointer. Can you?
All right.
Right, does this appear to be a map of the area in which you live in Beverly Hills?
Yes.
Okay, and does it show your house at 713 North Maple Drive?
Yes.
Okay, could you point to your house? And is Zlotolow written in green where your house is?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Are you familiar with Elm Drive in Beverly Hills?
Yes.
And where is Elm Drive in relation to Maple Drive?
1 block west. It's right there.
And between Elm Drive, the houses on Elm Drive and Maple Drive, is there an alley?
Yes.
Okay, and is that an alley that is shared by the houses?
Yes.
Could you point to the area where the alley is on the map?
Right through here.
Okay. Are you familiar with 722 North Elm Drive?
Yes, vaguely.
Okay. And can you see if you can find 722 North Elm Drive on that map and point to it for us? Right, and that's a place that has Menendez written on it, correct?
Correct.
Now, getting back to August 20th, 1989, were you at home in the evening?
Yes.
And where, say between 9 and 11 that evening, where in your home were you?
In my bedroom.
Okay, and where is your bedroom?
Located at the rear of the house.
Okay. Now, when you say located at the rear of the house, is that, could you point on the map as to where in your lot your bedroom would be located?
Right about there.
Okay, about midpoint in the area?
Yeah.
Okay. And were you alone or were you with anyone else?
I was with some friends.
Who were you with? What are your friends' names?
It was my girlfriend and 2 friends from Las Vegas.
Okay. Now, your bedroom faces in what direction?
West towards the alley.
Right. So it faces actually towards the back of Elm Drive, correct?
Yes.
What were you doing? You said you were watching TV. Do you remember what you were watching?
Yeah, James Bond film.
What was the weather that night, if you remember?
I recall that it was warm.
Okay. And do you recall whether or not the windows in your bedroom were open?
Definitely they were open, all of them, because it was really hot that day earlier.
Okay. During the time that you were watching the James Bond movie, did you hear anything unusual?
Yes.
And what did you hear?
Series of popping sounds.
Were these sounds that were quick one after another?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you heard the popping sounds, were you able to tell what direction they were coming from?
Yeah, from up the block.
When you say from up the block, what do you mean?
This direction.
Okay, so they were
I guess to the northwest.
to the northwest of you. That would be in the direction of Elm Drive.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you do anything as a result of hearing these sounds?
Not immediately, no.
Okay. Did you think that?
Well, we have a question.
Thank you. What did you think the sounds were when you heard them that evening?
I didn't really think about it, but it could have been firecrackers. Could have been really anything.
All right. The next morning, did you come to find out about some unusual activity in the neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that?
I heard on the TV that there was a mafia hit on Elm Drive, something like this.
Did you see anything in your neighborhood that was unusual? Did you see police?
Yes, I saw police.
Okay. And that was in the area of 722 North Elm Drive?
Yeah, and in the alley. They were all over the place.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Mr. Zlotolow, is that
Yes.
close in pronunciation? Close?
Good enough.
Okay. Were you in your bedroom or were you in the guest house, or are those one and the same?
I was in my bedroom.
Is there also a guest house on the property?
Yes.
Did you ever tell anyone that you had been in the guest house at the time that you heard these noises?
Well, at the time, I was living in the bedroom, but now I live in the guest house. I moved. It's
Alright.
at the back of the property.
Okay, so the guest house is closer to the alley than your bedroom, is that correct?
It's right on the alley, yeah.
And so that would have been at the back of the property versus the middle of the property.
Correct.
And so it's your present recollection then that on the night that you heard these noises, you weren't in the guest house, but you were in your bedroom inside of the main house?
Yes.
And you had a television inside your bedroom?
Yes.
And I believe it's your testimony that you and your girlfriend and 2 friends of yours from Las Vegas were watching a James Bond movie.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Do you remember which James Bond movie it was?
That's what I want to know.
They said it was The Spy Who Loved Me. They should have it in the TV guide.
Okay. Do you have a specific memory of watching it, or are you just repeating something that you may have learned recently?
No, I was watching the film.
All right. And do you remember at what point during the film it was that you heard these noises?
To be fair, I love James Bond movies. They can kind of run together. So, I mean, I will say that.
In other words, had the movie started? Was it finished? Where was it?
Somewhere in the middle of the film.
Did you make any attempt at the time that you heard the noises to try to see what time it was?
No.
How long had you lived in that neighborhood as of August the 20th of 89?
I think that'd be 13 years.
During the summer, and especially around the 4th of July, had you ever heard firecrackers in your neighborhood?
Yes.
And do you have any memory of whether that summer you had heard firecrackers around the 4th of July?
Not specifically.
Now, when you said you heard popping noises, could you tell us about how many noises you heard?
I've gone over it in my head many times, and I'm going to say it's like 7 or 8. There was a couple, and then a short gap, and then a couple more.
All right. So when you're saying a couple, you mean more than 2 then?
Yes.
And so you heard some noises, and then you heard a break in the noises. Is that correct?
Yeah, like a pause.
All right. And then you heard some more noises. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And I take it that at the time you had an opinion about what those noises were.
Yeah, I guess. At the time I heard them, I thought probably it was firecrackers. It sounded like it could have been a string of firecrackers going off.
And so what did you do in regards to hearing those noises? Did you call the police?
No.
Did any of the people that you were watching the movie with call the police?
No, but we all heard it.
All
And we
right.
discussed it. It was after we went to the beach that day and everybody was tired.
Okay, wait.
Sorry.
You really can't testify to what other people say.
All right.
What I asked you is whether or not you called the police.
No.
All right. And so, but you did note with the other people in the room with you watching the movie appeared to perk up and listen. Would that be correct to say?
Yes.
Now, I believe you indicated that it was a very hot day that day, and therefore all the windows in your bedroom were open.
Yes.
How many windows did you have in your bedroom?
Well, this is my bedroom, and then there was like an adjoining room, and the adjoining room was like all windows. We've since remodeled the house. It's no longer like that, but I'd say 5 or 6 windows.
So all of the available windows in those 2 areas were open.
Yes.
Did you hear any other noises, loud noises that night prior to hearing the popping noises? You have to say out loud.
Oh, no.
All right, court reporter can't take it down when you shake your
Sorry.
head. Now, the 2 defendants who are here in court, Lyle and Erik Menendez, did you know them personally as of the 20th of August of 1989?
No.
And you'd never seen them before?
No.
Had you ever heard any other noises coming from the direction that were distinctive, the same direction that you've told us about? Within the month prior to the popping noise.
I'd say no.
May I have a moment, please? Oh, I have, yes, I have a couple more questions. Have you at one time described these noises as being somewhat muffled?
Yeah. It could
Is
be.
that correct that they were muffled?
Yeah.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Redirect.
Mr. Zlotolow, you live in this house with your parents, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Or you lived there with your parents back in 1989.
Yes.
And when you describe, you say the word muffled. What do you mean?
She used the word.
Okay. But you said that they were muffled sounds. Were they?
Yes.
Okay. And what does that mean?
Well, I guess you'd really have to play a bunch of sounds and compare them. It's kind of complicated to explain, but there's clear, sharp sounds, and then there are other sounds that aren't so clear. And muffled can mean anything in between those 2 points.
Okay, so they were sounds that you heard at some distance.
Yes.
Okay. And you said that there were about 7 or 8 pops that you remember hearing,
Yes.
and that's obviously your best guess at this point, right?
Yes.
And it said that you heard 2 and there was a short gap.
I heard
Pause.
a few. It could have been 3, could have been 4.
Was that a gap of like seconds?
Maybe a second and a half.
So it was very short.
Yeah, short gap.
All right, thank you. I have nothing further.
Any requests? All right, thank you. You may step down. You're excused.
Thank you.
All right.
In regards to the next witness, the attorneys have had to do a little juggling of their witnesses, rescheduling of witnesses to have witnesses available because of the change in our schedule here, because of the days off and uncertainty as to when we would be able to start again. So their next witness has arrived, but they need some time to speak with that witness. And there might be some matters that have to be discussed by the lawyers in the court in relationship to that witness's testimony. So first of all, to give the lawyers a chance to speak with the witness, and then give them a chance to speak with me if they want to. I don't know if they will. We'll take a break at this point and resume at 1:30 as far as the juries are concerned. We'll have the lawyers stay here for a few minutes to discuss matters.
It'll
And
be more than a
also
few
the
minutes, so we're
lawyers
gonna
will
skip
be
ahead.
back at 1 o'clock so that we can resume with any matters that have to be resolved before the witness testifies this afternoon.
Okay.
Well, all I could say is I
skipping
don't
ahead.
want to be in a position.
So before we get to the next witness, though, there are some questions that I wanted to answer. Draco Amy, is she the one who exposed the confessions? It's talking about the first witness, Pamela LiCausi. No, she's not. She's not his girlfriend that was also the live-in nanny that was also maybe his patient for a period of time, wearing a lot of hats in this trial, or in that universe of facts, we could say. No, this is a different woman who just had this other experience. She was called in chiefly for her testimony about her as a rebuttal witness as to his character for honesty or dishonesty. So it seems like they're bringing in whoever they can to talk about how dishonest and how much of a creep Dr. Oziel is, and she is one of them. But thank you for the question. Christian Williams, Legalbytes, question for later. Would you consider streaming Jodi Arias and Casey Anthony for classic trials in the future? They are on the list. They are on the list for consideration for what we might do after this one. I haven't yet made the decision, but those two are definitely on the list because they are very interesting cases. Also wants to know if Weisberg was biased as the defense claimed, could they not have taken it to a higher court or a different judge? It's a very high standard to try to get a case overturned because of the judge's bias. You have to really show that a decision that the judge made was crucial material, would have changed the outcome of the case. It's really hard to do that when there's like these little, like, I don't like the word microaggressions because I feel like that gets sprinkled around a lot, but like, there's these like little micro interactions where he's just sort of abrupt with a witness or just, short with people. And it just sort of gives this appearance of disapproval of the defense or the defense's witnesses. An argument can absolutely be made. And I wonder if an argument was made, but yeah, it's really, really, really hard to get a verdict overturned on the basis of something like that, especially if you cannot really point to anything specific to say, no, like the jury definitely was impacted by this and they would have decided otherwise had they not had this happen in front of them. Elaine Bredehoft. Well, The illustrious Elaine Bredehoft is in the chat. Wants to know any chance of doing the OJ trial. Yeah, that's also on the list of contenders. That one wouldn't be right after this one because this is a very long trial. And I would like something a little bit shorter right after this one, and the OJ trial is even longer. So I know that would go on for a very long time. And that one I might like, if I did it, I would maybe do it like a couple times a week, just to sort of like truncate that. But I don't know. It's definitely on the list because it doesn't get more consequential in terms of impacting the public consciousness of, the judicial system, than that case really. So, okay, that's all the questions that I've got now, unless there were some that were asked while I was looking at the other tab. Okay. All righty. Okay. Let's continue on.
Position middle of next week or even Thursday of next week, where we have to take a day or half a day's break just to accommodate the testimony of Summerfield on Friday. We don't know if he'll testify at all, and we don't know how long his testimony would be, but if it requires you to start testimony of your client on Thursday and break it for Summerfield, then that's the way it'll have to be. All right. Anything else now before the juries come in?
Judge, we have the police report on Hunter Oziel with the court. I'm looking at a bracket for the court with a couple of
Okay.
paragraphs.
Yeah, you can give that to the clerk.
December 12th.
That's something that the prosecution gave you, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Did you hear anything unusual as you sat in bed that night reading?
Well, I didn't sit, I was lying
Okay,
in bed and I was
By the way, sorry, just to let you guys know, I responded in chat, but questions about delay with the audio and video. I know that that's been happening on my streams lately. What I realized is I'm pretty sure, I'm like 85% sure that it's because my computer is just tired from taxing it from other stuff, from research, editing, rendering, all that kind of stuff. And so what I need to do before streams is just get better at turning my computer off for like 30 minutes before starting a live stream again, because then things will be better in terms of like audio delays and whatnot. So anyway, so just to let you guys know, if you're seeing a delay or you're experiencing a delay with my audio and visual, that's probably why. I didn't take a chance to turn off my computer before live streaming. And also, this is Virginia Lord. So thank you to Menendez Trials, or Menendez Cases, I think, sorry, in the chat earlier, pointed out that her name is Virginia Lord. She's another neighbor from Beverly Hills. So
was reading and at almost, it seemed to me exactly 10 o'clock, I heard pop, 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 pop. And I thought, what kids in the neighborhood are lighting firecrackers this time of night on a Sunday night?
Okay. Now, you've said that it was almost exactly at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
What makes you say that?
Because I have a clock right next to my bed.
Okay.
And I
And
looked at it.
All right. So you looked at the clock and remember seeing 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Mrs. Lord, excuse me, but do you have any hearing problems?
Yes, I do have hearing problems corrected by hearing aids.
Okay. And when you were in bed reading on August 20th at about 10 o'clock, were you wearing your
Yes,
hearing
I
aids?
was. Mm-hmm.
And you described the noise as pops?
It sounded to me like firecrackers, pops, yes.
Okay. And these were a number of pops that you heard
A
last week?
regular pop, 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 and I can't tell you how many. I never counted them, of course.
Okay. If if those noises that you heard were to be described as a boom, would that be accurate or inaccurate in
I
terms of
think
what you
that's
heard?
inaccurate.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination?
That's okay. We're shifting.
Mrs. Lord, how long have you lived in that neighborhood?
I've lived in that house 33 years. I
And-
lived in another house on the street before that.
All right, so you've lived in that house for 33 years? Is that yes?
That's how I know about firecrackers, because my children used to light them once in a while.
Okay, so prior to August the 20th of 1989, you had heard firecrackers in your neighborhood, hadn't you?
Prior to that time?
Yeah, prior to the night
Oh,
you heard the
yes.
noises.
Uh-huh.
In spite of the fact that it's Beverly Hills, do people set off firecrackers sometimes, like for the 4th of July?
Well, actually, sometimes there are firecrackers on the 4th of July, and sometimes, in our area, and sometimes not.
Now, when you heard the noises, did they appear to come all at the same time, or was there any pause in any of the shots that you
As
or
I
the-
said, they were irregular, but as far as 4 years ago, I couldn't tell you exactly.
Have you ever met either of the two defendants who are here in court?
I've never seen them before in my life, no.
And after you heard these noises that night, did you call the police?
No, because I thought they were firecrackers and they stopped, so I continued reading.
Did you hear any other noises before you heard the
Nothing.
firecrackers?
Nothing.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Hey.
Anything else?
No additional questions from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You're
Thank you.
excused. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, that was short.
Your next witness.
Oh, Terry Baralt. Charts here.
All right, if you would stand right behind this court reporter over here and face the court clerk, please. Raise your right hand.
This morning, you solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause not pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
So we've got questions about, but I guess before we start with this witness, we've got some questions about what was the point of that testimony and the testimony before that. Well, these were brought on, keep in mind, these were brought on by the defense and not the prosecution. And I think that what they wanted them to testify to was a reminder about the sound of the firearms. I think usually when you're around a shotgun and you hear it go off, I think most people would probably describe that as a boom, right? Like it's a very powerful firearm. If you've ever shot a shotgun versus other kinds of firearms too, it's a very different experience shooting a shotgun versus like a handgun or a 22, various different types of firearms. It's been a while since I have shot any of these, but I have. And I remember, so I learned how to shoot them in high school when I was in I think I've talked about this before, but I was in a program that was in Boy Scouts of America. That was a co-ed branch back before they allowed girls in Boy Scouts, which I don't know if that's still going on, but I remember hearing about that a few years ago. But anyway, I was in Girl Scouts. And then when my girlfriends and I were old enough, most of whom were also Girl Scouts, when we were over 14 years old, we could join venture crews. So we could do more high adventure stuff. We could go whitewater rafting. We could go sailing. We could go, do like these like shooting weekends, like that were like organized to go to a range with other venture crews and things like that. So we would learn how to properly shoot these things safely, effectively on a range, all of the safety measures, in place that are, not Baldwining, like none of that kind of nonsense. But, so I remember the shotgun was my least favorite because of the power of the recoil. It was so noisy. And it would like if you had to hold your shoulder really properly, because otherwise you would end up with a bruise on your shoulder. And it just was so noisy that like usually it was so powerful that like, to shoot a clay pigeon in the sky was just like so difficult for me that like it just was a little bit more frustrating than some of the other firearms. But yeah, so the idea that someone would describe a shotgun as like a popping noise or sounding like a firecracker is a little bit strange. So it's I think that the defense is doing this, introducing these witnesses to basically introduce some reasonable doubt about what other witnesses who testified for the state say that they saw and heard, right? So because they were kind of needed to piece together the timeline of things that happened in the state's case in chief. And so I think that it's just to sort of introduce some reasonable doubt about who heard what, where it seemed to come from, what they were describing it as, things like that. And also like what even were the weapons that were used, which I think based on the forensics on the bodies and then the pellets and things that were, and the wadding and other items that were found in the home, I don't think that there's any doubt that they used shotguns, especially since they actually admitted to it. But anyway, it's just to introduce some mud into it, in my opinion. It does seem somewhat pointless because that's not really where the big fight is, but I mean, that's just kind of my impression is they're just taking an opportunity to do that while they can. Okay, let's continue.
Could you tell us your full name and spell your last name?
Yes, Teresita Baralt, Baralt.
Could you spell your first name as well?
Teresita.
Mrs. Baralt, are you the sister of Jose Menendez and the sister-in-law of Kitty Menendez?
Yes, I am.
And we have a family tree up here. And can you find yourself on the family tree?
Right here.
And your husband's name is Carlos?
Yes,
And you have 4 daughters, Sylvia, Christina, Alicia, and Anna Maria?
yes, no age.
Sorry about that. And Jose was your brother, is that correct?
Yes, he was.
Younger or older?
I'm the oldest. He was the youngest.
And Marta is your
It's the middle
sister.
one, yes.
Mrs. Baralt,
Yes,
were you born in Cuba?
yes, I was.
And was your brother Jose born in Cuba as well?
Yes, all 3 of us were.
Marta as well?
Mhm.
And when did you come here from Cuba?
November 1960,
And when did your brother Jose come here?
October the 7th, 1960.
And when he came here, were you and he living in close proximity to each other?
When he came over, he came with my husband to be at the time. Okay, I was still in Cuba, and he lived in Hazleton, Pennsylvania with Carlos and his family. I lived in Illinois with Carlos's parents, and we were not married. So,
Okay.
okay.
At what point in time did you begin to live close to your brother Jose?
Okay, I came in 3 days before my wedding, which was June 24th, 1961. Jose came to live with us first week in July. And he lived with us until January that he went to Southern Illinois to school.
And over the period from 1960 till August of 1989, a period of almost 29 years, what period of time did you live either in the same house or within 15 minutes of him?
14 and a half years.
And did you see him and his family on a regular basis?
Very often.
If you look up at the chart up there,
Okay.
you will see that we have a number of the homes that they lived in listed. Did you live near them when they lived in Wexford Terrace in New York?
No, we were at the time in Evansville, Indiana.
What about when they lived in Cedar Grove, New Jersey?
They moved there because we were living there,
So you lived near them then.
around a mile.
What about at the Hinsdale home in Illinois?
We lived across the street, and we moved there because they were living there.
Okay. And when they lived in Muncie, New York, did you live nearby?
No, we had stayed in Hinsdale, Illinois, and they moved to Muncie. When we were transferred back to Princeton, they sold their house in Muncie and they came to live in Princeton.
During the period of time they were living in Muncie, New York, did you ever visit them at their house?
Very much so. Very often, yes.
How often would you visit them?
Well, we spent Christmas together. I would come to the East Coast because my parents were also here. And summertime, I would make sure that the children came. We would stay mainly with my parents who lived in New Jersey. And but saw them daily. I would come for maybe 3 weeks, and then I always tried to bring the children in the middle of the winter to see their grandparents.
Did you spend holidays together, birthdays, Easter, Thanksgiving? Other
You mean
holidays like
during
that?
all those years?
During the years they were in Muncie?
Yes, we tried to do Christmas and Thanksgiving for sure. And then we took a vacation to Hilton Head for a week. We'd liked vacation together, so we did that often.
Now, when they moved into the Princeton Junction house, were you living nearby?
I was living at the time in Hopewell, and we had chosen 2 lots in the Princeton Junction area. It didn't materialize because they didn't get, the builders didn't get the ordinance. And at that time, I had started my children at the high school there. I had high school kids. Their kids were small. And then we bought 2 lots, one across the street from each other on the house, the other house, not the Princeton Junction, but the Pennington house. But I had high school kids. You don't move them around.
Okay.
So we bought a house in the West Windsor area and stay there. So that's only 15 minutes away.
Okay. When they lived in the Princeton Junction, are you a little nervous?
I'm very nervous.
When you lived in when they lived in the Princeton
Yes.
Junction house, did you live nearby them?
Yes, around 10 minutes.
Okay. And when they lived in the Pennington house, how far away did you live?
Reverse. They moved to where we were coming from.
Okay.
So it was around 10, 15 minutes away.
And when they bought the Mountain Avenue home, that's still in the same area, I take it? So you were still
Closer.
close?
It was closer than to our house.
And in 1986, when they moved to California, you remained in New Jersey.
We're still in the same place. We've lived in that house for 15 years.
When you were living in the Hinsdale house,
Mhm.
were Lyle and Eric born at that point in time?
Oh, yes. Lyle was around 3, and Eric was born. They moved there in November of 1970. Eric was born in November of 1970. They moved 2 weeks after Eric was born. We joined them the following summer. And by that time, I think Lyle was 3, and Eric was 7 or 8 months by the time we moved there.
And were you in touch with the Menendez family during the time that they were first in Hinsdale before you moved there, in terms of how the kids were doing, what was going on with them? Did you talk on the phone?
We talked often.
How often? Once a day, once a week, once a month?
Probably once a week during that time until, Carlos went to work with Jose in Hinsdale. In that area, in the Chicago area. And we moved there.
Were you getting reports about Lyle's progress as a baby?
Yes.
And did there seem to be a lot of family pride in his doing things early?
Lyle was a very fast baby. He stood up at 5 by himself. He walked at 7 or 8 months. Everything he did, he rode his bike by 3.5, no training wheels. This kid was coordinated, to say the least.
And were you getting reports regularly about his progress?
Oh, yes.
And did it seem to be
Well, they were very proud of him, and they had reason to be.
Your Honor, may I mark a photograph I've shown these in the prosecution next in order?
201.
Showing you what you've marked, what I've marked as 201. Do you recognize that photograph?
I hadn't seen it before, but I recognize the baby.
Okay, who's the baby?
Lyle.
Okay. And were you given photographs that sort of marked his progress along those lines in terms of when he stood up and that type of thing?
I wasn't given the photographs, but I certainly did see them.
And showing you what I've previously marked as 150. I'll ask you to look at that photograph and see if you recognize it.
Find one of my glasses.
Yeah. This is Lyle and the steps in his house,
His house where?
Hinsdale.
And is there another house in the photograph?
Yeah, that's my home.
Okay, so he's standing in front of his house, which you can't see. Is that correct?
You can't see his home, but I recognize the steps.
Okay, and you can see your home.
Well, I can see the back of my home, yes.
And was there something unusual that happened on a regular basis with regard to Eric and going to your home?
Well, Eric would wake up early in the morning, still in his diapers, get out of the house, and go and bang on my back door. She's right here. I would open the door, and there would be Eric, a year and a half, less, with his diapers halfway down his legs. So I would call Kitty and said, Kitty, Eric is here. Terry, impossible. Eric is in bed. I said, well, go check because I have somebody else's child here. Day in, day out.
How many times do you think this happened?
Gosh, I don't know. It was a habit by then.
Do you think it happened 20 times?
15? 15, somewhere around there.
And did it cause you any concern because he had to cross the street to get to you? Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did you ever discuss with Kitty the fact that this might be dangerous if this child is crossing the street?
We did discuss it, and
She seemed to be concerned.
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did she
Yeah.
indicate that she was concerned about this? Did she say
What was her reaction?
she was concerned?
well, I think it was more embarrassment of the fact that a 1.5-year-old could just walk out of the house without her knowing about it. I mean, it happens once, but so often.
What year were Kitty and Jose married?
1963.
And were you around them when they were first married?
I was around them not that often because when they married, they went to New York, and I was living in Evansville, Indiana, and I had 3 little ones to take care of. So I saw them. At the time, I didn't have 3 little ones. I had 2 and another one on the way. But I saw them, like I said, I always went in February for around 3 weeks to my parents. So I saw them there. I saw them for Christmas, the holidays.
Did you witness fights between them?
Yes,
Did you have an opportunity to see Kitty's temper?
yes.
Did she have a bad temper?
Kitty had a temper.
Did you ever see her physically strike her husband?
While he was driving a car I was sitting in, yes.
Now, did she just reach over and tap him? Or
Well, they were having an argument, and she was very exasperated, and she just started hitting him. and,
fists?
Yeah, that was a normal reaction for Kitty, just to close her fist and just get very upset. And so he drove with the left hand while he held her hands with the right. And then she calmed down.
Did you
But-
ever see her strike him on any other occasion?
No, that was the only time in front of me.
When, after they were married, did Jose continue going to school?
Jose was 2 years younger. He was only 19 when they married.
And when did he graduate?
He worked full time and went to school at night. And I think he graduated in either 65 or 66.
So when Lyle Menendez was born in 1968, he would have been working full-time and not going to school, is that correct?
Yes, he was out of school already.
Where was he working?
I think he was Libran, Coopers and Libran.
And what was he working? What was
He was, one of his degrees was in accounting. He graduated with 2 degrees. And he needed 3 years in an accounting firm in order for his CPA to come through. He had taken the exam, he had passed it, but you have to pay your dues. And so he had worked there like 3 years as an accountant. Auditing, I think, is what he was doing.
Okay, so at the time Lyle Menendez was born, he was working full-time as an accountant.
I think so.
It might have been a couple of years.
I think
Is
so.
that correct?
I think so.
Like to mark next in order, Your Honor,
202.
202. Ask if you recognize this photograph.
Andy, by the way, this is not my house.
Okay, which is your house?
It's over here.
Oh, all right.
See this?
If you hear Indy's growling, everything is fine. Holmes is under the chair and they are playing with each other. So Indy is just trying to get to Holmes and play. So just so you guys know. So funny.
See the difference?
So this is your house and this
Yes.
photograph with the bicycle.
This is why I looked at it and okay.
Perhaps you
This
can
is-
identify the photograph she was pointing to as not being her house.
Okay.
Photograph number 150, her house is to the right of the house.
To the right of that one.
Okay, the photograph shows a house. That's not your house.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yours is to the right of it.
Yeah, mine is to the right.
Okay, and the photograph with Lyle on the bicycle
Exactly.
shows your house.
Exactly. See, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
My house would be directly this way.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. This is Lyle. He's what, 4 at the most.
And he's on a two-wheel bicycle
Yeah.
with no training wheels?
I don't remember ever seeing Lyle on training wheels.
So he started out on a two-wheeler with no training wheels.
Yes.
Whoa.
And next in order would be 203, Your Honor.
Okay.
Can you identify that for me?
Yes, I recognize the chair. This was taken at my mother's house.
You recognize the
That's
children?
Lyle and Eric as a baby. This must have been before they went to, they moved to Illinois when Eric was born.
Now, when they were little, very little, when Eric was first born, did they seem to have a good relationship? Or did
Erik and Lyle?
yes. Did there seem to be some jealousy?
No. I would say it was a very typical relationship of a 3-year difference between siblings.
And what do you mean by that?
I think Lyle was a little jealous of Eric, especially of the attention that Eric was getting from his mom.
Did Eric get more attention from his mother than Lyle got from his mother?
There was no question.
Pardon me. That's
Sorry.
time. Like what time period?
All right, objection sustained. You can rephrase the question.
When
Eric was born,
Mhm.
and while Lyle was very young, did you see what appeared to be jealousy?
Between the children.
Yes.
Yes.
And why did that appear to be?
objection irrelevant, call for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you see a difference in the amount of attention that Kitty gave Eric versus the amount of attention that she gave Lyle?
Objection made.
The same time period, Your Honor.
Yes. Kitty, whether she was more prepared to be for motherhood when Eric was born, there was a difference. There was a difference. I think Kitty had a rapport with Eric. Kitty never had a rapport with Lyle. I know that sounds awful, but that's the way I saw it.
And as the boys grew older in their teenage years, did you still see the same jealousy, or did the relationship
No.
change?
No, they became very good friends. I don't know whether it was.
Okay, I think you've answered the question.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Your next question, please.
You had told us about the incident of, or the repeated incidents of Eric crossing the street to your house.
Yes.
Was there an attitude demonstrated by Kitty that her kids should be fearless, and as a result, she did not protect them as much as you thought she might have?
Objection, sound found in meeting.
Sustain.
Was Kitty a protective mother?
No.
And were you aware of some instances in which the children were exposed to situations you considered to be dangerous?
Yes, but that was Kitty's theory.
What was Kitty's theory?
We discussed that many times. She thought I was very overprotective. She thought that children, when you leave them alone, they learn to defend themselves. And that it's on an everyday situation.
Yikes.
Was there an incident in which you were having a conversation with her shortly after Lyle had had some surgery as a young child?
No, I didn't have what do you mean by that?
let me go back.
Specify that,
Okay.
yeah. Clarify that.
Did Lyle Menendez have surgery as a young child for a
Yes.
hernia?
For a hernia, right here on the stomach.
Okay.
Yes.
And did you have a conversation with Kitty right after he had the hernia operation?
Yes.
And was she letting Lyle do something you thought was dangerous?
Well, Kitty related this story to me. Okay. She said that.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I'm the objection's being upside down.
Okay.
Sustain.
Was this going on? Was she relating the story to you as the event was taking place?
After it took place.
And was it regarding something that she had just permitted Lyle to do, which you thought was dangerous?
Yes.
Okay. And could you tell us what that was?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Objection sustained. It's hearsay.
I'd like to show you what I've now marked as 203, Your Honor.
I think we have 203. Is this a new exhibit? Okay, it'll be 204.
Do you recognize the boy and the dog?
Yes, that's Lyle.
And who's the dog?
I don't know which one of the Airedales this one is. I don't know whether this is Ken or George.
Okay. Was there an incident involving Lyle and a dog named, an Airedale named George?
Yes, he bit Lyle on the cheek.
Okay. Now, was this dog known to be a good dog for kids to be around?
No.
Objection, pardon me, objection, false speculation, not a foundation.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
Were people careful about not letting small children around George?
We have some foundation, at the very least, as to who the owner of the dog was.
Who owned George?
Kitty's father.
And were small children supposed to be permitted around George?
No.
Why not?
Because they raised the Airedales, they themselves, the ones that they had, were raised to protect them. They had a summer camp in Canada. And at night, and I'm telling you because I was there with my kids, and after 9 o'clock, you couldn't leave the cottage because the dogs would be allowed loose in the camp. And this was their protection. So these Airedales were raised so that anything make them snap. They were used to adults and certain adults. I mean, you just didn't get close to them.
And did Kitty let Lyle get close in spite of that warning?
Brought them to the house. George came as the family pet. Well, it didn't last long.
What happened to Lyle?
He has a scar to prove it.
That's the scar on his right cheek?
Hmm.
Did that happen when he was 3 years old?
He was 3. The dog was bigger than he was.
And did they then take a relative of George as a pet?
Ken. Yes.
And was Ken of the similar disposition?
Oh, yes. Um,
All right, you've answered the question.
yeah,
For another one.
Was this dog a dog you would let your children be around?
my kids were terrified of Ken.
And was that Lyle's dog, that was the dog he was expected to play with?
That was the family pet.
And was this sort of a source of pride with Kitty that her son could be around this dangerous dog?
Sustained.
Did Kitty ever try to keep her children from being around this dog who was dangerous?
No.
Was the dog eventually destroyed?
Well, when they moved to Muncie, the dog went with them. The dog mauled to death a little dog that somebody was walking on a leash.
Oh my God.
And attacked a couple of people. So they gave the dog to somebody who owned a farm. And eventually the dog had to be put to sleep.
There's been some testimony about private talks that Jose would have with Lyle Menendez. Did you witness any such talks in your house during the years in which Lyle was in college?
Yes.
And where were those talks take place?
Well, Jose did not like to reprimand his kids in public.
Where was
And to the basement. The basement is an office in my house. Okay.
And so it would be private.
Yes.
And after one of these talks, was there some discussion about the fact that Jose had notes and Lyle didn't, and this was the subject of some concern?
Lyle.
We have
the
a
one.
foundation as to who was speaking when you say a discussion.
Did Lyle say something about having gone into that meeting with his father without notes?
Yes. Lyle said to me, he says, would you believe Dad came to talk to me all prepared, notes and all. Yes.
And was it of some concern to Lyle that he didn't have notes? Objection irrelevant.
Objection overruled on that ground.
I think he fell at a disadvantage.
After the family moved to the West Coast in 1986, Lyle remained back in New Jersey. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you spend a great deal of time at your house?
Lyle lived in my house 90% of the time. He had room and board at the university, but he liked staying in my house.
And did that seem to be a subject of some concern with parents and spending so much time with you?
I think Kitty was bothered by it. I don't think Jose was as bothered. I think Kitty was bothered by it. She kept on saying he has room and board paid at the university. Why does he stay there? She was very possessive of her children, and I think she felt.
Pardon me, I moved to strike everything.
Okay.
At this point, Your Honor, the question has already been answered. Was she possessive?
All right, there has been an objection, so the objection is sustained. The answer is stricken. You can re-ask the question.
Thank you. Was Kitty possessive of her children?
Yes.
And did she seem to resent anybody getting close to them? Cause for conclusion and speculation like foundation.
Sustained.
During the time that the family was living on the West Coast.
So she wasn't able to give her opinion about whether or not she thought that Kitty was possessive of the boys because, having to do with Lyle staying in at her place while going to Princeton because as they stated, his room and board was all being taken care of. So, why was he choosing to stay with his aunt so much when he could be an independent young man and, live the college life and all this kind of stuff? But it seems Kitty was more bothered than Jose. That to me sounds like jealousy. That sounds like a mother who is jealous of maybe her son is seeking sort of a maternal kind of relationship with an aunt in the family that sort of like removes her from the role of being his mother. She can't exactly testify to this, however, because it's a little bit outside the realm of what she can testify to. That would be pretty speculative. So that's basically what they're getting at here. But if you're the jury, you can kind of sort of, it's like they just put some some bullet points around this one point that you can really connect the dots, and see that that's probably the reason why Kitty was so bothered by that.
And Lyle was living in New Jersey. Would Kitty ever call and see how Lyle was doing?
Overall.
Yes,
How
between,
often did she call?
okay, Kitty called me every single day around 4 o'clock California time, 7 o'clock. The reason this is so much in my mind is because it was dinner time for us. And
Okay, you've answered the question.
Did this happen in fact every day?
yes,
And what was the purpose of the call?
gather information about Lyle.
And did Jose call you also about Lyle?
Jose called once, maybe twice a week around, but his call was at 2 o'clock.
So he also called once or twice a week and asked you about Lyle, what he was doing.
Exactly.
Did they seem to ask a lot of questions, detailed questions about?
Jose didn't.
But Kitty did?
Kitty did.
And in addition to these phone calls, did Jose and Kitty ever come back to visit?
Very often.
What's very often?
Okay, Jose would be in probably once or twice a month. And Kitty normally came with him.
And would they bring Eric along?
No,
So
Eric was left home by himself.
after Kitty and Jose died, Lyle spent a lot of money. Is that correct?
Yes,
Lyle spent a lot of money before they died.
Lyle always spent a lot of money.
And what did he spend money on?
Anything.
We have a definition as to time frame here.
Okay. Say, from the time that he was a teenager, was he spending money as a teenager, buying things?
I know, you're hungry.
Yes, Lyle is a generous kid. If you're a friend, he'll buy you the world or give it to you. And yes, his friends always had all kinds of things. Lyle bought me this, Lyle bought me that. And if they went to a restaurant, Lyle paid.
Did he have a credit card?
I imagine he did. I'm not, that I wasn't. I knew he had a signature on his parents' account with a $6,000 credit line, which he used.
And did he have do you seem to have access to a checking account?
That was a checking account, yes.
Okay. And was it a sort of a topic of family conversation, the fact that Lyle always spent a lot of money?
Sustain.
Did you ever have any discussions with his mother or father about the fact that he always spent a lot of
Yes.
money? Did Kitty like to go shopping?
Sustain.
Did you ever go shopping with Kitty?
Yes.
And did you go shopping with her at times when the children were brought along?
Yes.
And when Kitty would go shopping, did she like to spend a lot of money also? Or buy a lot of things?
Yes. Kitty was, I don't know what the word would be, but somebody who, compulsive buyer, okay.
Now, on any of these instances, when you went shopping, did you take along Erik and Lyle when they were young?
Yes, I did.
And were there any situations in which Kitty was paged while you were shopping?
Only once.
Okay. What happened?
And, well, she didn't hurry. I mean, at least she knew where they were.
That what
To me, that was,
did the boys disappear?
well, the boys went in, and this was everybody take off in their different directions, and she went shopping. And then when they were paged, that she knew where they were.
Okay, so she got paged. Your children, Mrs. Menendez, your children are at the information booth or at security or something like that.
There was one instance when we couldn't find Lyle. And we found Lyle in a shop down the block on an ice cream place, eating an ice cream. Well, the owner figured that parent would come at some point. He had kept the kid there feeding him ice cream. It was quite a bill.
The time when she was paged, How old was he when he was down the street eating ice cream?
Young, 4 or 5. Not much older than that.
The time when she gets paged in the shopping mall.
Yeah.
How old are the kids?
I don't remember. They were young. I mean, you don't page a parent unless the child is very young.
And when she was paged, how did she react?
Now we know where they are.
She continued shopping?
Yes.
Was Kitty Menendez good with animals?
Kitty was wonderful with animals.
Really?
Was she caring?
She was caring. She loved them.
Was she gentle?
Very.
Was she kind?
Yes, and seemed to understand them. Amazing.
Did you ever see her
That's surprising.
show to her children the same kind of compassion you saw her show
Probably
to
not.
animals?
No, she was, it was very strange because she was a different person with the animals.
In what way?
She really cared for the animals. Okay, it's like kids don't need it, but the animals do. It's like somebody who is an animal lover, you know, and not necessarily a kid person.
That's so strange.
I have some other photographs I'd like to show you.
Okay.
I'd like to mark these 4 additional photos.
But at the same time, I mean, she also would let them, run amok in the house and leave crud all over the house on the inside, and it smelled, like people have testified that it smelled really bad. And so it's like, how much did she actually love and understand these animals if she wasn't properly taking care of them? Same thing with the dog George. How much did she really understand that dog if she brought it in willingly when knowing that she had a 3-year-old? Because like if you are familiar with dogs, you might understand that toddlers are considered like the most risky for a dog because toddlers are like little drunk adults, like they're more likely than I think any other age to get bitten by a dog because they're very mobile, and at the same time they have less control over their limbs, and they tend to be very vocal and very loud. They're very like sporadic in their movements, and like so toddlers are more likely, I think, to get bitten by a dog because a dog calculating the movements of an adult is relatively easy. Calculating a teenager's movements, calculating a baby's movements, because they don't really move very far very quickly. But toddlers, on the other hand, are very fast. They go all over the place. They're very loud. It's like a lot more of like a risky sort of situation for a dog. So much more likely to be bitten. So bringing in a dog like what they've described George to have been while Lyle was 3 years old, toddler age, is just like, that's just a recipe for disaster. So for someone, she's saying here that Kitty really loved and understood all of the animals. I kind of want to push back on that a little bit because of what we also heard about George.
Starting at 2:05.
Mrs. Baralt, I'd like to show you the photographs I've now marked as 205 through 208 and ask you if you recognize the people and the house.
Okay. This picture,
First, do you recognize the house?
I think the house, because of the people who are also in the house, this is the Hinsdale house. And I will tell you why. My brother-in-law lived down the block
Okay.
from us, okay? The children. No, this is not the Muncie house. This is a Muncie house.
Okay.
This is a Muncie house.
New York.
Yeah, because these are the curtains that she had in the Muncie house. Yeah.
This is 205. They're all photographs of the same location.
Yeah.
And do you see Lyle and Eric in there?
Yes. There's Lyle and there's Eric.
And showing you the other pictures which we've marked as 206,
Yeah.
207, and 208, do they appear to all be taken the same day because everybody's wearing the same clothes?
Yes, and it appears to be somewhere around Easter time.
And does it appear that Eric has some sort of injury to his face?
Yes.
Do you have
And
any
I have no idea how he
particular-
got it.
memory of, was it unusual to have him have an injury?
It had to have been a very fresh one because Eric healed in 24 hours.
Did Eric get a lot of injuries?
No, I only recall one he had over the eyebrow in a store. And obviously that one, but I don't remember that one.
And there was no discussion about it in particular that stands out in your mind?
No.
That day?
No big deal would have been made of it anyway.
Why?
Well, because Kitty considered that a part of growing up.
Getting injuries?
Yeah, it's scraped like that. It's okay.
Was it important to Kitty that her children not show fear?
Very much so.
Was there an incident in which Eric was left home alone and called you?
Well, Eric was left home alone often. The day that he called me, it was a storm and they lost power.
About how old was he?
Around 8.
And what happened when he called you?
Well, he called and my oldest one, he must have been, around 8.5 because she was 17 and just starting to drive. She went over and stayed with him.
Was he frightened?
He was very frightened.
And so your oldest one is Sylvia?
Sylvia.
Okay, so Sylvia went over and stayed with him. And did you have any discussion with Kitty about that?
Kitty was very upset.
Why?
She was very angry because she felt he should have handled the situation. Kitty didn't understand fear, didn't accept it from the boys. It was not, you're not afraid. I mean, simply, regardless of the age.
Was that true
That
with
was-
her also? She was not afraid?
She wasn't, no.
Did Eric ever call you again when he was home alone
Oh, no.
and frightened?
He knew better.
Was there an incident at a theme park where Eric was not brave enough to go on a ride?
Well, it wasn't even a ride. We had gone, they were around 6, and I have one that is 3 months younger than Eric. And we had taken Lyle, Eric, and Anna Maria to the amusement park. And it's like you go into this tent and there's all kinds of, it's like a trampoline, but not really a trampoline. The only thing is that you lose your balance, and that was part of the fun. Well, Eric didn't like that. Didn't like it at all. He refused to go in. Kitty was fit to be tied because a little girl had gone in and he wouldn't.
And how did she show that she was fit to be tied?
We heard about it all the way to the car.
What was she saying?
I don't see what you have to be afraid of. Look, even a little girl goes in. Why should it? She just didn't accept it. I mean, that's all there is to it.
How did Eric look during all this?
Oh, I think Eric wanted to die. He cried. He cried but did not go in. He stood his ground.
Did your brother have to raise his voice to let people know he was displeased with them?
No, Jose did not need to raise his voice or be violent for that matter.
Was there something about his voice or his presence that could be very effective without yelling?
An adult is always an impressive figure on a child. An adult that whose the tone of voice and the body language tells a kid exactly, what they should be afraid of. He could be harsh. He could say the things in a way that make you feel like you want to disappear. I saw him do it to a lot of people. He never did it to me.
Would
But
he do it to adults?
Oh, easily. He could put an adult back in its place that person wants to die. Yes, he had that ability. He was very articulate and he didn't raise his voice. In fact, the angrier he got, the lower his voice got and the slower he spoke by the time he finished with you.
Did you call it once
That's
a cut
creepy.
you to shreds tone of voice?
Yes. And I used to tell him.
Did you ever say to your brother or to Kitty, I don't approve of how you're raising your children. I think you should change some things?
I didn't tell him to change it. We discussed raising kids. We did not agree. At the time, neither point was proven. They couldn't prove that I was wrong. I couldn't prove that they were wrong.
What would have happened if you really pushed the issue about they should do things differently?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you ever push the issue?
No,
Why?
Well, because when you live either close to friends or family, the first thing you have to have is respect for their ways. I did not see them being abusive to the children. They just saw their ways of parenting to be completely different from mine. But those were their kids. Maybe their ways would have been better. Wasn't proven so.
In terms of their type of parenting, you're talking about the fearlessness, the exposure to danger. Is there also a competition factor that was different?
There was a lot of pressure in that household. Okay, there was a lot of pressure to excel. Whatever you did, you had to be the best at it. Trying was not good enough. And to grow up with that amount of pressure is very hard on children. They also had, their schedule was such that there was no time to go outside and play. Every minute of their day was accounted for, and always intensely.
Wait for another question.
I'm sorry.
Did you see a change in the relationship between Kitty and Jose after they moved to California?
I thought it was the California air. They looked like honeymooners, and I had no idea what it was. We all talked about it. He was extremely gentle with her, like when you are afraid to say anything, his tone of voice, his way. I thought California did it.
You didn't move. Did you help Lyle clean out his room at the dorm in Princeton in June of 1989?
I most certainly did.
And was your mother helping you as well?
My mother and I had to go and pack him. He had that day to get out. He was also catching a flight back to California. And it was the end of the school year. So my mother and I went over and organized that Lyle was. Everything was everywhere. So we helped pack. Yes.
Do you know who Donovan Goudreau is?
Oh, yes.
And how is it that you know Donovan?
Uh-oh.
Well, he was a close friend of Lyle's for a while, and they lived in my house.
Did you get to know Donovan pretty well?
Yes.
Did he appear to be Lyle's closest friend?
At the time, he was.
Did you get to know someone else named Glenn Stevens?
Yes.
And was Glenn a close friend of Lyle's?
Glenn liked to think so. I don't think he was.
Was he
I think he was just somebody who was there with a group of close friends, but not Lyle's close friend, no.
When you were cleaning out the dorm room, did you come across anything that belonged to Donovan Boudreau?
His driver's license.
And did you come across anything else that belonged
There were a lot of papers in there, and I showed them to Lyle, and I said, Lyle, this is Donovan's driver's license. And he said, yeah, Aunt Terry, when he left all his things behind, all his important papers behind.
And were these in a drawer? Or
they were on the
somewhere?
floor, like with everything else. And I said, well, do you want me to take it? He says, no, I'll give it to him at some point. And he took all that.
Did you see any other papers of Donovan's that were there?
There were a bunch of papers that were Donovan's. I just didn't go and look into it. No.
Did they appear to be set aside for safekeeping in any way?
They were on the floor.
Objection overruled. Your answer was what?
On the floor.
During the time that you knew Glenn Stevens, did you know him to be wearing a Rolex watch, which had been given to him by Lyle?
He was not given a Rolex watch. He was asked to hold the Rolex watch. I asked him for it. He said, Lyle told me to save it for him because it may come as evidence in the future. This was when Lyle was apprehended. And I said, Glenn, I think that you should leave the watch here. And after that, we tried.
Did he ever give it back?
No, he did not. They didn't even return our calls.
When Jose would be visiting at your house, would he get calls from Kitty?
Especially when they were in California, yes.
How often would she call him when he was there visiting?
Overruled.
Okay, if he was there, he would arrive there. Jose normally stayed at the Nassau Inn on campus to be closer to Lyle. And if he would come and stay in my house like a couple of hours, 2-3 hours, Kitty would call at least 3 or 4 times in those 2 hours.
During the period of time that you knew him, was there some concern on her part with regard to his fidelity?
During the time that I knew them?
Yes.
Yes. But she had that concern since the moment she married. She was paranoid about Jose ever having an affair.
And was there a time in early 1980 in which she moved out because of that?
Yes.
And where did she and her children go?
No, the children didn't go anywhere. The children stayed home.
So she just left?
She left. She moved to a hotel.
And they subsequently got back together, I take it?
Yes.
Did you know anything about what Kitty Menendez's travel plans were in August of 1989?
Travel plans?
Yes. Was she going to go anywhere?
Well, they went to the Nationals in the beginning of August.
Is that in Michigan?
Kalamazoo, Michigan,
Right.
isn't it? I
Yes.
think. Then I know that September the 9th, she was going to be in Princeton to help Lyle set up his apartment in Princeton. I know that she had to be back by the 24th of September because she had to set Erik up in college. And the 14th of October, we were going to Hawaii together, the 4 of us.
Did she ever talk to you about any plans to go to South America?
Not to me.
Did you talk to her every day?
During that time, I talked to her. I had gone to Chicago in the beginning of August, and I had 3 messages from her in the hotel. We never connected. We did after she came back from Kalamazoo. And no, I talked to her a few times, mainly because we were setting up the fact that she was coming over to set up Lyle's condo and thinking about what kind of furniture, etc. So yes, we did talk about it.
Now, was this a new condominium that Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were buying for Lyle?
Yes.
And it was to be ready for him to move into early September?
Well, the closing was supposed to have been September 4th.
When were they in escrow on it then during the summer in August when you were talking to her about her plans?
Okay. Lyle was going back to Princeton. Okay. And in July,
Count it out.
do I answer? Do I wait?
Why don't you wait so they can hear you say?
Were you given any instructions with regard to having a key to that condo?
Yes.
And what were you to do with the key to the condo?
Well, Kitty and I had a discussion on that, and I told her she was placing me in a very, very difficult position.
What did Kitty want you to do?
She wanted me to. Sorry.
You wish to be heard?
I'll do the foundation if I can, Your Honor. Did Kitty express to you some concern over a girlfriend that Lyle had at that time?
Jamie, yes.
And did she like or dislike her?
She didn't like Jamie.
And did she want you to do something to make sure that Jamie did not spend time at the condominium?
She wanted me to get a spare key to the apartment, which probably I would have had. But what she wanted me to do is to go in and check and make sure that she was not living there.
And what if she found out that, what if you found out that she was living there? Were you to report that? Did she tell you what to do if you
Yes.
found out? What did she tell you?
She wanted to know immediately. It was a 2-bedroom suite. Okay, one of the bedrooms was going to be for them whenever they came into the Princeton area. But she wanted to make sure that Jamie was not there.
Did you refuse to do that?
Well, I told her she was placing me in a very, very uncomfortable position, mainly because I was very close to Lyle and I felt like a traitor. And so she said, well, we'll discuss that at some other time. But with Kitty, it was very hard to say no to Kitty.
Why?
Because Kitty didn't accept no for an answer. And whenever you stuck to your ground, that means there was going to be a problem. I mean, she just didn't accept a no for an answer.
Was she controlled by her husband? In those last years,
Okay.
last 3 to 5 years that you were around them, did it appear that Jose had total control over Kitty?
The world liked to think so. That was not so. She just learned to be very good in public. Like there were no more open fights. She just stayed quiet. But not in private, because when private meant many times we were there, Carlos and I. She held her ground.
Was she strong?
Oh, Kitty had an opinion. There's no question about it.
Was there any issue with regard to Kitty's drinking toward the end, the last 3 to 5 years?
That was always kept from me. I did not know that she had a drinking problem.
Did you ever see her drink around you and ask you not to let Jose know?
Okay. Whenever they came to the East Coast, she would come over to our house early and stay the afternoon, and Jose will come after work around 7 o'clock. So we would sit where I'll fix dinner, and we would have a cup of coffee. Her cup of coffee always included half a cup of Galliano.
Is that a liqueur?
I don't know what that is. It's a big bottle.
But I mean, it's
So
alcohol.
like a wine and liqueur type. And she enjoyed that. When Jose came, she says, put it away. He doesn't like it when I drink. But I assume, and this is my assumption, that,
Pardon me, I think.
okay,
Yeah, never use the word assume if you're testifying.
Did Lyle
In
spend
instant
time at your home
speculation.
even as a little child? You said he did in college.
Objection.
Did he spend time at your home as a little child?
sometimes, but always with the family. Except when they lived across the street and he used to come often.
Did you get to have time alone with Eric?
Not as much. Not as much. They moved to California when Eric was around 13 or 14. And at that time, a child doesn't drive.
And when you would see Lyle, would he ever spend the night at your house?
Sometimes they did. They both did. I used to give them one of the girls' bedrooms, beds with two beds. And many times they would come back at 2 o'clock in the morning whenever we got back. And Jose will carry both boys asleep to the car.
So they didn't spend the night really very often.
Not very often.
Did Lyle have any stuffed animals he'd bring with him?
Lyle had a bed, stuffed animal. There was no space for Lyle in the bed.
Did they seem to be important to him?
Very much so.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Okay.
Any examination on behalf of Erik Menendez?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few minutes.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so we're going to get into more direct examination by the other defense legal team, but let me answer some questions here. Debbie Faison Cook says, how did the second trial get the same judge, or is that normal? I don't know, to be honest. I don't know the answer to that question. It would more likely depend on the rotation of judges and how long that a judge is serving. Sometimes cases will get rotated to a different judge just because of the length of the docket of these various cases. It could have stayed with him because he was very familiar with that case by that point. So rather than bringing up some other judge up to speed to be able to manage the case. But yeah, I don't know the story on this particular one, why he was the second time around, but it can happen. Legal-minded friends Karen Nicole says, did you do a poll to see how many of us thought the kids were guilty of first-degree murder? That is a very good question. I will definitely be doing that. I'll do that in the next few minutes. I think that's a fantastic question. I haven't done that in a while. I think I did that in one of like the earlier episodes. I haven't done it in a long time though, so we definitely should. I'm sure I have a feeling I have a feeling how the polling results will end up, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe you guys will surprise me. Christian Williams says, random question for later. Do dogs and cats really not like each other, or is that a stereotype? I mean, I'm no expert on animal behavior, but I can just tell you what I know from my experiences. I think dogs have a natural instinct to chase, and sometimes to hunt. Some dogs have a greater instinct than others. I know that Indy doesn't have necessarily an instinct to hunt, but definitely to chase. So with the case of Indy and Holmes, they get along famously, partly because of the fact that they were babies together. So we had Holmes as a kitten first, and then not long, like a couple months later, Holmes was still very much a kitten when we got Indy as a 4-month-old puppy. And so they sort of were raised together. So they were very, very little together. And so I think that really, really helped for them to bond. As far as our other cat, Astra, we brought her in as a kitten, but Indy was already much bigger, much more confident about our space, our home space. So she was much more willing to be in Astra's face. But unfortunately, Astra as a kitten was very weak and very sickly. She had like multiple broken bones and like one of her hind legs, and her pelvis was broken. She was like on death's doorstep basically when we found her. So so she was in a much less like confident position as opposed to Holmes, who has always been a very confident cat. So she has never meshed well with Indy. Not to say that they fight, but she just, there's no cuddle time between the two of them. But Holmes and Indy will sometimes cuddle up together even, and Holmes and Astor get along famously. So Holmes is basically everyone's best friend in our home. So Astra is much better now, but she's definitely, like, you can tell that with the way that she walks, that her bones didn't quite settle very well. And like her tail also, I think she may have even broken at least one of her tailbones. She's got a little crick on the end of her tail. But yeah, so she, we kind of managed the whole ecosystem. We've learned how to manage it, but different dogs have different instinct levels, like different breeds. Some of them are more typical diggers, some others will howl. Indy is not the type of dog that will howl when she hears other dogs howling. So, different dogs have different sort of instincts that you can, sometimes you can train out of them, sometimes not so much. So if Indy loves to chase, so if she sees if we're on a walk, for example, and she sees another cat, especially if it's running, she will want to chase that cat. And it's not because she wants to hunt it, she wants to play with it. So anyway, total random aside, not having to do with the trial, but anyway, little nerd one, why not assume isn't assume hearsay. So this is, I mentioned that, so what the witness started to say, I assume that, and there was an instant objection. The objection to that is speculation, because if you are a witness and you say, I assumed something or other, or I assume this or that, you are signaling to everyone in the courtroom that you made some kind of a speculation. You made some sort of a logical leap, which is not acceptable for witness testimony coming from a lay witness. From an expert witness, you have a lot more leeway because you are there. You have been qualified as an expert in a particular field. So long as you're talking within the scope of that expertise, you are able to state assumptions, make opinion conclusions, things like that. So you're able to do that. But as a lay witness, you're not able to speculate. You're not able to give your opinion, except for in some limited circumstances. For example, with the first witness that we heard from today, that was a character rebuttal witness. So she was able to give her opinion on Dr. Oziel's character, specifically for his level of honesty. So that's basically it on that. So anytime you hear a lay witness say the word assume, you should be able to like pick up on like, oh, there's going to be a speculation objection. And that's what the objection is based on, is on the idea that this witness is speculating, and that's not acceptable. So, okay. I think that is all of those. Okay, let's go.
Let's do it now.
Okay. Actually, I could use a few minutes if I can get there.
All right, I believe we have everybody here now. You may conduct your examination of the witness.
Mr. Baralt, I want to turn your attention back to Hinsdale, Illinois.
Okay.
There's this photograph here. Number 202, which shows tip it a little bit so that you can see it and so that the gold jury can see it.
Okay.
Okay, this photograph here, this shows the street that separates the lot behind your house from the Menendez house, correct?
Yes, correct.
So you describe now a pattern of behavior by Erik Menendez when he was about 18 months old, where he would show up at your back door. About
Yes.
What time of day would he show up?
Between 6:45 and 7 o'clock in the morning.
Whoa.
And in order to get to the back door of your house that's shown in that photograph from his house, he'd have to cross, first of all, that grassy vacant lot.
He had to get out of his crib.
Has to get out of his crib and out of his room.
Yes.
And is this a two-story house that the Menendez?
It was a split level.
And is his room up a level or on?
All the bedrooms were on the top floor.
So he has to get out of his crib and he's got to go down some stairs, correct?
Exactly.
And he has to get out a door that leads to the outside.
The front door.
And was your understanding he was leaving through the front door?
Through the front door, yes.
And then he had to go down. Was the house raised above ground level?
No.
Jeez.
We'll try to find
Okay. There, you see the steps here? He would get out of the house.
You're pointing to a picture on the right.
Here.
Let me get
Okay.
a number so that the record.
The door would be facing this way. So he would get out and he wouldn't use that. He would go straight down the lawn, cross the street and go straight.
Okay, this is 150. See if I can do this so that Jules can see. So there's a set. The door actually there's like a glass enclosed front.
The whole house was a very modern house and it was all glass. You could see, glass all the way up.
It was like a 2-story entryway. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, and it was like a vestibule with a glass wall, and that would lead to that was the front door.
That was the front door.
And the opening to the vestibule led to these steps.
Yeah, exactly.
So at a year and a half, Erik would walk out and down those steps and across the lawn.
Across the lawn over here, straight into my house. There would be a path by then that he had made.
Well, the path would be in this grassy vacant lot.
Exactly.
But to get from the lawn or the steps of his house to that vacant lot, he had to cross the street.
Oh yeah, that street over there.
And that's a street on which the cars would go to get to the houses in that development, right?
Yes.
Now, it was your habit and custom, I take it, when Erik would show up at your door to call back to your brother's house
Yes,
to let them know that the baby was at your house.
exactly.
And would this behavior of Erik's occur during the winter as well as other times of year?
Well, it occurs mainly in the spring, but remember the spring in Illinois
It's cold.
Yes.
And when Erik would show up at your door, he'd be wearing a diaper that was slipped down.
Well, he would be out of bed. Babies wake up. At the time, the diapers were not like they are now, fancy and tight.
They slipped.
They slipped.
And he was wearing, I take it, no shoes.
Oh, no shoes. And just a shirt.
Just like a little undershirt top.
Either undershirt or a pajama top or anything like that.
Would there be days when he showed up at your door, he was wet and muddy from the lot?
If it had rained the day before, yes. Or if it was raining,
He'd come in the rain?
Yes.
And when you would call your brother's house, most often was it your sister-in-law who answered the phone?
Kitty was who answered, and Kitty was mainly who came.
You would tell her that Erik was at your house. She'd say, no, he's in his crib.
She'd say, Terry, it's 7:15. Erik is sleeping. I said, then I have somebody else's child here.
And did she seem embarrassed when she would come and pick him up?
More frustrated.
Frustrated?
Yes.
Would she say anything to Erik?
It's limited what you can say to an 18-month-old, like, Erik, you shouldn't leave the house without telling mommy. Went in one ear, out the other.
Okay, so she wouldn't give this little lecture to him, and yet he'd show up again at your house.
Yeah, next day.
And in fact, you said at some point a path was beaten through the grass.
Yes.
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 Now, you said that Kitty Menendez treated Erik as a baby and toddler differently than she had treated Lyle. Is that correct?
That was my observation, yes.
Okay. Tell me what kinds of signs of physical affection you saw between Kitty Menendez and Erik when Erik was an infant or a toddler.
Okay. Erik was extremely attached to his mother. Okay. And Kitty was not an affectionate person with the kids. But she would have kind of when you look at a child condescendingly. Okay, that was the relationship. That relationship wasn't there with Lyle at all.
Okay, so you saw, let me see if I understand it. You saw Kitty Menendez give condescending looks to Erik when he was a baby. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Is that what you saw?
Yeah, if that's the right word to describe somebody who just
Okay. But you didn't even see her give condescending looks to Lyle when Lyle was a baby.
I wasn't around Lyle as much that first year of his life, okay? But the rapport between her and Lyle was never there.
Nothing was there.
No, that's why he had it with me. You find it somewhere else.
Okay, but let me back up to between her and Eric. You didn't see her hug Eric, did you?
I don't remember seeing it, no.
You didn't see her kiss Eric.
I don't remember seeing it.
You didn't see her carrying him around and hugging him and rocking him and singing to him, doing any of those things, did you?
No, but you know, Kitty was not an affectionate person.
I understand, but I want the juries to understand what you did see and what you didn't see. Okay, so what you saw was Eric clung to her. Is that right?
Yes.
He went to her a lot.
Eric was very attached to his mother, yes.
And when Lyle was a little toddler, you didn't see him go to Kitty at all. Now, when Eric was before his second birthday, we'll strike that.
Okay.
At around the time that Eric was 2, did Jose and Kitty Menendez leave Hinsdale and move to Muncie, New York?
Yes, they did.
And at this age, when Eric was around 2, was he still clinging to his mother, going to her for affection?
It was less than that. It was the summer of 1972.
So he was only a year and a half.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And this is the same age we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. And when he was at that age, did Kitty Menendez leave Hinsdale and go to New York to try to find a house?
Yes, she did.
And did she leave Eric behind with you?
She left Eric behind with me.
And how did Eric behave after his mother had left him behind with you?
Overall.
Eric was devastated.
How do you know that?
Well,
and how did he act? I told you that.
Okay. First of all, the pattern that he did about coming from his house to mine with a smile in his face to eat crackers at 7 o'clock in the morning was then reversed one day only. Okay. I found him in his doorstep crying.
At his house?
At his house. He was very attached to my husband. And Carlos would have to come home from work and be the one bathing him and dressing him because he wanted at that moment nobody else to touch him. He was that devastated.
Did he cry a lot?
He cried continuously. I called her and they came back for him.
Do you know how long it was between the time they left him with you and when they came back?
Only a week.
But for that,
because he was in too much pain.
For that entire week, he cried?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, third one. Thank you so much
you
for the
mentioned
super sticker. Very, very
Ms.
generous
Lansing
of you.
was talking to you that Kitty thought you were overprotective in the way that you parented your children.
Mm-hmm.
Were
She did.
you?
I don't think so, but sometimes you have ideas of yourself that are not accurate.
And did you think, and do you think it's necessary for parents to protect children?
Objection.
Sustained.
Yeah,
Did you
little broad of
discuss
a
with
question.
Kitty Menendez your notion that children should be protected from fearful things, from dangerous things?
Objection. Asking.
Overall.
Okay. Yes, we discussed that. We discussed her opinion of what it was to raise, how she wanted to raise her children.
All right,
and
this has been asked and answered. Go on to something else.
Okay. Now, you've told us about an incident when your oldest daughter, Sylvia, went to your brother's house because there was this was an electrical storm that had knocked out the power.
Oh, yes.
And this was nighttime.
It was around 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
It was dark.
It's dark because in the wintertime at 5 o'clock it's dark, at least in the East Coast.
So Eric was home alone in the dark during this storm.
He had been left alone for a few hours, yes.
And when you indicated that Kitty got very upset when she discovered that Sylvia had gone over there, that Eric had called.
Yes.
And did she explain why she was so upset?
Sustained.
Had you ever said to Kitty Menendez that you did not think it was right for her to leave Erik alone in the house?
Overruled.
I didn't have to because
All right, you've answered the question.
You'd never said it to her?
no.
Did you have a discussion about leaving children alone
Yes.
in the house? And in the course of that discussion, did you,
She knew how strongly I felt
about not leaving
about
children alone?
not leaving an unattended child, regardless of the age.
You told us that after Jose and Kitty moved to California, Kitty would call you at approximately 4:00 California time every single day.
That is true.
And you would talk to her every single day for about how long?
An hour and a half.
Did she tell you during any of these phone calls about how she had gone to New York and searched for Jose's mistress, Louise?
I was completely unaware of that.
Did she tell you that she had caught Jose in a 6-year-long affair? It's
Sustained.
not being offered for truth, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Did Kitty tell you her secrets?
I don't think so.
Did you know before she died that she had been in therapy for almost 3 years?
No.
Overruled. Your answer?
No, I did not know.
Okay.
Did you know before recently that Erik had suffered from learning disabilities when he was in school?
Your Honor, this is irrelevant whether or not she knows.
Now let me,
Objection overruled. You can answer the question.
No, I did not know.
All right, your next question, please.
did you know that Erik, the summer before they moved to California, attended a school for learning disabled called the Lewis School?
No, I didn't know, which bothered me.
Okay, wait. You have to wait for another question.
Now,
No, I didn't know is the answer.
No,
The
I
rest is
didn't know.
stricken.
Mrs. Baralt, do you have a daughter who needed some assistance in learning in school?
Sustained.
Were you, when you would talk to your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, would you share with her both the good and the bad about your children?
Overruled.
Yes, I did. You
And
can't hide things like that.
you didn't hide things like that, is that right?
No, there's no shame in that.
And did
It's a
you,
fact.
did you discuss openly in front of Kitty the fact that one of your children needed some learning assistance?
Sure.
But she never discussed that one of her children needed that assistance with you, is that right?
No, she didn't.
In fact, how did she describe to you Erik's performance academically over the years?
Glowingly.
And how did she describe both Erik and Lyle's athletic performance over the years?
In the same way, but those I attended, those I saw.
So were there times when you actually saw that they didn't win every single match they ever played?
Yes, and that's all right. Yeah,
And you thought that was all right that they didn't win?
of course.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did Kitty Menendez ever tell you that she had written suicide notes and left them around for her children to find?
Sustained.
Did she ever talk to you about her thoughts of suicide?
Overruled.
No, I did not know.
Did you know before she died that there was even a hospitalization that looked like a suicide attempt?
Rephrase the question.
Yes. Did you learn before she died that she had been taken to a hospital for an overdose?
No.
Oh,
Do you think you were the closest person to her?
Objection calls for speculation like a foundation.
Overruled. You can answer.
I'd like to think that we were close.
Did you know anyone that she spoke to as extensively or as frequently as you?
Objection like a foundation.
Overruled.
I knew that she had discussed some of the learning problems with Faith Goldsmith.
When did you know that?
Recently?
Okay, but we got to go back in time to not what you learned. You learned a lot of things after they died that you didn't know.
Yes.
Is that correct?
And I wish I had known more. I could have helped.
Yes.
All right, let's ask a question, please.
Did Kitty complain to you about her missed career opportunities because she had children?
Objection sustained.
Did she express to you the desire that she would have preferred having girls to boy children?
Sustained.
Or did you ever hear her say that in front of the boys?
No, not in front of the boys.
And finally, I wanted to show you some photographs that I've, with the court's permission, marked 209 and 210. Please ask me, first of all, do you recognize the people in these photographs?
Those are Lyle and Eric.
And do you recognize the place where the photographs are taken?
I can tell you when they were taken. It was Easter Sunday in front of St. Paul's after the Mass was over.
And St. Paul's is a Catholic church.
It's a Catholic church in Nassau, on Nassau Street in Princeton.
And if I were to tell you that, and I will connect it later, that the notations on the original of this photograph indicates April 1978, does that appear right based on how the boys look at these pictures?
Yes, that's about the, that was the year they moved to Princeton.
They moved to the
From Muncie, well, they moved from Muncie to the Princeton area, and I think that was the first Easter that we had there.
that you had there together in the Princeton area.
In the Princeton area. Correction, the first Easter was in 1977. I think this one was 1978.
Can I ask you this?
Yeah.
Do you recall telling me 2 years ago
Okay.
that they moved to the Princeton area in August of 1977?
Yes, because
So-
Eric went to school in the Westminster area that September.
So
And that was-
April of 1978, after the change in the year, would be the first Easter, wouldn't it?
No, because I moved in, yes, you're right.
Okay.
Because I moved in the summer of 77. That's
Okay.
true. You're correct.
Thank you, Mrs. Ball, for having me.
Yes.
Mrs. Baralt,
Yes.
drawing your attention to the two photographs which have just been placed up here,
Of course.
210 and 209. I believe you indicated they were taken in front of a church. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did the family attend the church on the day that these photographs were taken?
Will did.
All right. Was it usual that the family attended church on occasion?
Well, we attended Easter Sunday always together.
When you say we, who's we?
We, it's my husband, my children, Jose, Kitty, and the boys.
And that was Catholic church. Is that
That was
correct?
Catholic church. That was at 11:30 Mass, and then we went for breakfast.
Aside from Easter Sunday, did you go to any other church services with your brother and his family?
Not normally.
But it was a tradition that you attended church on Easter.
On Easter Sunday, yes, all of us together.
Do you know whether or not the defendants were baptized?
Yes, they were. I'm Lyle's godmother.
All right. And do you know whether or not they received their first communion?
Yes, they did.
Now, was your sister-in-law, you knew her as Kitty, is that correct?
I knew her as Kitty, yes.
All right. Was your sister-in-law Kitty Menendez, did she raise her sons in the Catholic faith?
Yes, she did.
I take it, was your family Catholic as well?
Yes, and so was hers.
Before testifying today, did you have any meetings with the defense in this case?
Oh, we've had a lot of meetings. These children have been in jail for over 3 years, and they're like my kids. Of course we have.
You love them very much, don't you?
I do love them, yes.
Have
I
you-
loved Jose and Kitty too.
Well, have you heard some of the things that have been said about your brother since the defense case started?
Yes.
All right, the objection is withdrawn.
Can you say anything nice about your brother,
I
Jose?
can say a lot of very nice things.
Did your brother Jose ever do anything nice for another human being?
I think so. I think this is a tremendous tragedy. And the tragedy is that these children love the parents. Something went definitely wrong in there.
Okay, but no, Mrs.
Okay,
Baralt,
go ahead.
did you ever see your brother do anything nice for his children?
Yes.
Okay, could you give me an example?
Okay, I'll give you an example. When Lyle broke his collarbone, okay, he was playing soccer. And it resumed. The child went down and he stayed down. Jose was beside himself. He stopped the game because everybody continued. And this happened in the course of a game. It was not like the game stopped and then they resumed. Nobody saw him. They saw him go down and stay down. He said to me, if Lyle is down and has not gotten up, he has to be very hurt. And he just interrupted that game and pulled him out. Sure enough, Lyle had a broken collarbone.
Did he take him for treatment?
Oh, immediately.
Did your brother love his sons?
Objection, Your Honor, that calls for speculation.
Yeah. What?
I think he did. Yes, you can love somebody and still hurt them, you know.
Okay, but it appeared to you that he loved his sons?
I think so, yes.
Did you love your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez?
I love them both.
Okay. Was Kitty fun to be around?
Tremendously.
Okay, why was she fun to be around?
Okay. Kitty was very bright. She was, whenever you had them, wherever, in a party, in a house, in a reunion, just sitting around the kitchen table, okay? There was, what can I say? There was never, you know how sometimes you're in a group of people and the conversation kind of dies? With them, that never happened.
Would you say they were lively?
Very lively. Jose could come home from the office, and normally somebody would come from the office, say, how was your day? So, oh, another day. Or it was like a soap. I mean, he always had something to say about his day.
Did he ever use his day as entertainment for other people?
Definitely. I mean, his anecdotes, he could relate a story like nobody else.
I believe you indicated that on occasion, Jose could look at a person and make them feel terrible. Did you ever see him make other people laugh?
All the time. He was a very charismatic individual, okay? He was a lot of fun to be with, and if he liked you, he could be fantastic. If he didn't like you...
Did you ever see him around people that he appeared to like?
Of course.
He liked you?
I think we had a very close, good relationship, yes.
Did your brother, Jose Menendez, want his sons to do better than he had done?
Clarify that for me.
Well, did he want the best for his sons?
He wanted the best for his son, and he overlooked the fact that he was a self-driven individual. You can't make somebody else be what you want them to be. They have to want it themselves.
He was very driven.
He was a very driven, successful person, yes.
And he was a successful businessman.
Yes, he was.
Now, you said that your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, liked to go shopping.
Yes.
Did your brother-in-law, did your brother make a lot of money? Did Jose make?
Jose made a lot of money, and he never held it back from Kitty. Well, I mean, the paycheck went into the account, and she spent it.
All right.
It's the same in my house.
Pardon me?
It's the same in my house.
Okay, you get to spend your husband's money too. Okay. When you moved to Chicago,
not relevant, but okay.
Was there some sort of employment relationship between your husband and Mr. Menendez?
Yes. When Jose went in as president of Lions Container Services, he called Carlos to go in as his vice president of administration and finance, and that's why we moved to Chicago.
So he gave your husband a job. Is that correct?
My husband had a job. Yes, my husband switched. Yes.
Right. I mean, he gave him a different job.
Yes, a different job.
And after your brother left and went back to New York, did your husband stay on in the job that he had obtained?
No, there was a proxy files. The Japanese took over.
Okay, so you got a new job.
We both got a new job. He with Hertz in the East Coast, and we stayed with an appraisal firm in the Chicago area.
Did your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, appear to love her sons?
Yes, I think so.
Now, I take it from your testimony that she treated them very differently from the way you treated your children. Is that correct?
Definitely.
Okay. Now, you have 4 daughters.
Yes, I have.
Okay. And I believe you've indicated that on occasion, Kitty Menendez would tell you that she thought you were overprotective.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think there's a difference between raising daughters and raising sons?
You see, this is why mainly sometimes we did not, I don't think basically there should be a difference, okay? But I never went go into an argument with her about that because she always would say, well, Terry, you have girls. And I thought, well, maybe there's a difference. I didn't have a boy to prove that there shouldn't have been, you know?
And she didn't have a daughter.
And she didn't have a daughter, exactly.
I believe you indicated that you went on vacation with the Menendez family.
Often, yes.
What kind of vacations would you go on?
Okay. When we went to Hilton Head, we rented 2 condos. They had their condo, we had ours, and we spent a week there. We did that a couple of times. We went to Canada, to Kitty's father's camp for another week there. We went to, I mean, it was different until they started making a lot of money and we couldn't afford to go in their vacations.
All right, so this would have happened what to the
until around 1970s. The last time that we went on a vacation together, Lyle was going out with Stacy because Stacy came along. So he must have been around 16.
Okay, so Stacy went on the vacation?
Yeah. Stacy, Lyle, Kitty, and I. Jose was away, and I think Eric was in camp.
All right, and where did you go on vacation then with Stacy?
We went to Hilton Head.
Were you aware that the family took other vacations in which you weren't involved?
Oh, most definitely.
What other kinds of places did they go to that you were aware of?
They went on a diving vacation in the Cayman Islands.
Do you know
And
where
they got certified.
And did they take their sons on that vacation?
Oh, yes.
Do you know of any other vacations they took their sons on that you were not present for?
There was one in Key West. There was, I don't know, these children were always traveling. They were traveling with them, mainly tennis, traveling related experiences.
Do you know about what age it was that that the defendants started traveling for tennis? I mean, traveling further than an hour for a local match. When was it that they started traveling some distance? What ages were they?
Gosh, I would say traveling any distance, 11, 12, and teenage years, definitely. Because I don't think Lyle started playing tennis until he was around 9 or 10.
Okay, so about the ages of 11 or 12 for each of the defendants, they started to travel some distance to participate in matches. Is that correct?
And that's one of the things that Kitty and I had a disagreement on. On Thanksgiving, Jose and Lyle were never there. And I think Lyle resented that a little bit.
All right, but so they weren't there on Thanksgiving because they were traveling for tennis?
Erik and Kitty were always there. Jose and Lyle were always at Fort Washington for a tournament.
Okay, and where's Fort Washington?
It's like an hour and a half from us, but by the time they would get home on Thanksgiving night, he would have missed all the fun, and he resented that, I think.
Now, did you participate in family gatherings where you and your sister Marta and your brother Jose and all the kids would get together?
Yes, it wasn't very often for Martha, but yes.
Okay. Would you say that you were closer to your brother than Martha was?
Oh, there's no question about it.
Well, there's no question. What's the answer?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. And for a long period of time, Martha didn't even live. She lived in Puerto Rico.
She lived in Puerto Rico, exactly.
Did you ever see your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, hit either of her children, strike them?
I didn't.
So you never saw that?
No, I did not see it.
And I believe that you've indicated that of the 29 years that
Yes.
you were, that you knew them, that you lived within 15 minutes of them for 14 and a half.
14 and a half.
And during those 14 and a half years, would you see them at least once a week, the Menendez family?
Mainly on the weekends, yes.
Okay, but then at least once a week.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I want to ask you about these incidents. What you said about 15. That's 15.
1
15
5.
times.
That Eric came over to the house?
Yes.
Yes.
Was he ever injured on his trek across the grasslands to your house?
No.
Okay.
No.
And I believe you said it happened 15 times. About how old was he when it stopped?
Well, they moved out when Eric was less than 2 years old.
Okay, so it was between.
So this happened in a period of 3 months.
All right.
Okay,
So,
or 2 months, somewhere in there.
okay. Did you ever see your brother, Jose Menendez, strike either of his children?
I didn't.
I believe you indicated that Lyle Menendez spent a lot of time at your home. During
Yes.
which period of time was this?
Okay. Lyle started driving at 18, and that's when Lyle started to be free to come without having to wait for somebody to bring him. And mainly when he was at Princeton. He lived in my house. He had a room at Princeton, but he stayed at my house. I'm only 5 miles from Princeton.
So when he was at Princeton then, and he stayed at your house, would he stay there, 4 or 5 nights out of the week or more?
Every day. He lived there. He had a room.
Okay, when Donovan Goodrow was his friend, did Donovan also live with you?
Donovan stayed there 90% of the time.
All right, so Lyle Menendez was welcome in your home, is that correct?
I loved having him there.
Was his brother Eric also welcome in your home?
Eric was in California.
But he would have been welcome in your home?
He would have been welcome, yes.
Would you say you have a close relationship with your nephew, Lyle Menendez?
I think so.
When Lyle Menendez was a student at Princeton University, were you aware that he left the university for a period of about a year?
Yes, I did.
Were his parents upset about that?
Overall.
Also calls for Houston.
His parents were upset.
Wait, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Should be heard.
Under 1250, Your Honor.
Right, the objection's overruled.
Okay.
This is not received for the fruit, just what was said.
Lyle was asked to leave the university?
Yes.
I also object under 402, which is not like to be heard.
Okay, you may come up here. All right, your next question, please.
After your brother and your sister-in-law were killed, when did you come to California?
Immediately.
Was it
we received a call from Jose's secretary somewhere close to noon, which is 9 o'clock California time.
all right? That would have been Monday, the 21st of August.
The 21st of August, and I think we came 5 o'clock flight.
So you arrived on the 21st as well, is that correct?
Yes.
And how long did you stay in California during that period of time?
We went back with the bodies for burial.
So on that objection, just so you guys know, it looks like that objection was probably sustained. So what happened was the defense objected on basically on the basis that even if it is relevant, the prejudicial effect outweighs the probative value of this piece of evidence, so it should be kept out. So her answering that particular question, they went up to the judges, they went up to the front to discuss it with the judge outside of the presence of the jury and the cameras and the microphones and everything. So we weren't able to hear the back and forth on it. And they obviously cut it out. But when they came back, they had a completely different line of questioning, which suggests that the defense won on that objection.
For burial in the Princeton area. Everything is very confusing. I think it was either Saturday
Saturday the 26th?
whenever the bodies left, we left. Those are times where I am not very clear. I don't remember when. I think the memorial services were either Friday. I think they were Friday. You can correct me on that because you have the dates, I'm sure. We left with the bodies, and then there were memorial services in the Princeton area, and I think burial was Monday.
So you attended the memorial service in Los Angeles?
Yes.
And did either one of the two defendants speak at that service?
I'm going to object that this is beyond the scope.
Overall.
Whether they attended the services?
No, did either one of them speak at the service in Los Angeles?
Eric did.
And the memorial service in New Jersey, did you attend that one as well?
Yes, I did.
Did either one of the defendants speak?
Lyle spoke on that one. Eric had a few things to say there as well, but it's not the main bulk of it was Lyle.
When you went back to New Jersey for the memorial service there and for burial, during that period of time, did either one of the defendants live with you?
No, I believe Lyle stayed at and I think Eric did too, at the Nassau Inn.
And the Nassau Inn is in the city of Princeton?
It's in the center of Princeton, yes.
Now, at some point, did either one of the two defendants stay with you for an extended period of time in September?
Lyle stayed in. Eric never stayed longer than 24 hours. I complained about that. I didn't know, except when he got sick. And I took him to the pediatrician. He had severe stomach pains.
That was Erik Menendez?
That was Eric. And I took him to the doctor, has treated him all his life. And we took him to the hospital and had him checked. And he said at the time that it was stress.
Okay. Now, I believe you've indicated in your direct examination that Lyle always spent a lot of money. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But after his parents' death, did he
had more?
Pardon me?
He had more to spend.
Did you know he bought a Porsche?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this. It's improper, given previous rulings of this court.
Excuse me, I
Well,
believe.
this was brought out by the
Brought out direct.
examination of this witness. So.
No, and I'd like to be heard.
Yes.
Okay, you may. And before I do that, let me ask counsel, after this witness has been completed, you will have other witnesses tomorrow morning at 9? Okay. All right, there is some brief matters that the lawyers and I want to discuss further with this witness and discuss among ourselves, and we'll do that now, and we'll resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock. I'll ask that both juries return at 9 o'clock and remind you not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form any final opinions about the matter, and we'll see everybody back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock. All right, I believe all the jurors have left.
Okay.
Well, I haven't received notice from the bailiff. I think they have.
So, okay. So her testimony is going to be continuing then. That probably is a good time to end it right now then. I don't want it to go on for too long, or maybe we should do it like this. I don't want it to go on for too long because, some of these can go on quite long. And I, to be completely honest with you, I haven't looked at the next segment on Court TV's website to see how long her testimony goes beyond this, if it just goes for a little bit or if it goes on for like another hour or 2 hours or 3. So I guess we'll call it a day there on this one. And yeah, that one keeps going out a little bit. That's very strange. Okay, how about like that? There we go. That's better. So okay. Anyway, so that is probably going to be about it for today. But thank you so much, you guys, for hanging out with me once again for another episode of Classic Trials today, episode 29 in the books. And thank you so much to everyone for watching, for liking the stream, and for engaging with the chat. Oh, you know what? I never finished this. I never ended the poll. Okay. So poll results. I asked whether or not you guys thought that they were, at this point in time, based on the testimony that's come out, the evidence that's come out in front of the jury, whether you thought they were guilty or not guilty of first-degree murder. 62% said not guilty. 37% said guilty. Very interesting. That is a smaller spread than I had anticipated, which is good. I like that. I like seeing that because, it shows that the people are really, really, coming at this from different perspectives, which I like. It's we could always learn from seeing from watching something together from different perspectives. And I hope that I think maybe folks in the chat that are more vocal in the chat tend to be more defense minded, perhaps, or think that the brothers are not guilty. Perhaps those who are saying guilty at this point maybe don't engage as much in the chat. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I feel like I don't see that as much in the chat, but I would encourage everyone to definitely engage in the chat, if regardless of how you feel on this. One of the things that is very important to me is to make sure that we have a community that is open to disagreement, civil disagreement. And that's one of the things that I love about our mods, by the way. I always want to give props to our mods for doing such a fantastic job of making sure that environment is maintained for everybody to agree or disagree in as civil a way as possible. So yeah, that about does it. And I am so happy to see all of you guys here once again. I hope you guys will join me next week. For those who are members of Bite Club, we've got a members only live stream on Fridays. So I hope to see you there. I know that we've got some newer members that joined as a result or were gifted memberships as a result of the last hearing that we live streamed on Thursday and Friday in the Black Swan murder case. That one, I am still waiting on results. We are all still waiting on the results from the judge. So I'll keep you guys updated as much as possible. And otherwise, I'm working on the next deep dive. It is definitely a deep dive, so to speak. I'll tell you guys, I'm working on the Titanic legal aftermath from the sinking of the Titanic. So definitely go deep. Womp womp. Anyway, with that, I hope to see you guys in the next video. I really do. You guys are awesome. Wonderful. Always seeing you guys here. So, all right. Okay. See you guys.